Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for already being here and sat down. I'm going to not talk to you because you're already in place, but to those who are outside the door, please do come in. We're going to start imminently because President of the European Council, Antonio Costa, is arriving right now, and we are not starting precisely on time, which doesn't make me very happy, but we're going to start very soon. So to those who are lingering outside the door, please do come in and take a seat. And please take a seat near the front. And as ever, I'll bore you by encouraging you to sit over on this side where there's plenty of space near the front. So please, oh, wonderful. I can see people arriving on entourage with photographers. So that means we are going to start very, very soon. Good morning, everybody. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's lovely to have so many of you back in the room for the second day of the European Investment Bank Group 2026 Forum. And welcome also to all of you joining us online. I know many of you joined us online yesterday, and I hope you can remain with us for the course of today as well, because as with yesterday, it's a packed, dense agenda full of wonderful conversations and discussions. Now, yesterday we focused on Europe's priorities, competitiveness, security, innovation. Today we're going to turn our attention to scaling innovation, digital finance, and Europe's global role before moving into EIB Global Days through the course of this afternoon. I also am going to warmly encourage you to visit some of the stands. We've got a few stands which are just outside on the left through the coffee breaks and the lunch breaks as well. They're there for you to collaborate with, to have conversations with, and develop new networks as well. But without further ado, it is a great honor to have your presence with us here today, the President of the European Council, Antonio Costa.
Good morning, querida Nadia, dear President, dear Vice Presidents, Governors, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to be here with you today in the EIB Group Forum. 2025 has been an historic year for the European Union. We have built the main building blocks of the Europe of defense. We have increased our steadfast support for Ukraine to achieve a just and lasting peace. We forge new regional partnerships all over the world, especially on fair trade. It has also been an historic year for the European Investment Bank. A record of 100 billion euros in new financing, mobilizing substantial additional investment across Europe and beyond. A decisive stepping up in support for security and defense. Nearly 5% around 4 billion euros of its financing inside the European Union now reinforces deterrence, capabilities, and infrastructures. This is a very welcome development. The launch of key initiatives, such as Tech EU, an unwavering commitment to the green and energy transition, and in the multipolar world, the European Investment Bank has maintained a strong European presence in Africa and Latin America, two regions with strong partnerships and shared growth alongside the European Union. It highlights the European Investment Bank's unique role in supporting European Union values and priorities. Well done, querida Nadia. This year's forum takes place in the turning point for the European Union. We are redefining our competitiveness agenda in the fast-changing geoeconomic environment. Let me begin with confidence. This morning, the European economy stands on strong foundations: a highly skilled workforce, world-class research, industrial excellence, a sound financial system, a deep integration in global trade, strong institutions. We should be confident and proud of our social market economy. But we must also be realistic. Our prosperity is under pressure. We face fragmentation and geo-economic challenges that test our competitiveness and resilience. We have entered in the era of instability and strain. The war in Iran has revealed a new level of instability and disruption in the international order. In this environment, Europe needs and is responding with determination. Just as we made 2025 the year of European defense, we are making 2026 the year of European competitiveness. Less than 3 weeks ago, I convened European Union leaders in Aldenbizen to create new momentum around competitiveness. Only a more competitive and resilient economy promotes our prosperity, creates high-quality jobs, and ensures affordability. At the core lies the jewel of our crown, the single market. Just as we moved from the common to the single market, we must now complete the journey by creating one market for one Europe. First, we must complete the single market. We must integrate sectors like telecoms, energy, and capital markets. We need a savings and investment union capable of turning European savings into European investment. We need a new investment culture with household participation and strong consumer protection. We will act with determination to deliver by the end of 2027 on the savings and investment unions as proposed by the Commission. 2028 will be the year in which we finalize what was left to be completed in 1992. Second, we must allow companies to scale up. We have long said, think small first. Since SMEs are the backbone of our prosperity, many of them lack the scale to compete globally. Now we must also say, think scale first. Allowing a company to scale up in Europe to achieve the necessary levels of investment and innovation and to compete in the global market. We have to update our competition policy and acknowledge that in current geoeconomic context, our autonomy requires us to consider the global market as the relevant market. And the review of merger guidelines is a decisive opportunity. Third, European institutions are embracing a true simplification agenda. The Brussels effect must not become a burden, and member states must also address gold plating and domestic barriers. The most direct route to simplification is common European rules. Less directives, more regulations. We must go ahead with the 28th regime, at least for corporate law, to make sure our companies can operate seamlessly across our 27 member states with a simple and single set of corporate rules. Let business opt in European rules. Fourth, on energy prices. The energy transition remains the best long-term strategy for Europe to achieve a strategic autonomy and lower prices. For now, it's true that energy in some parts of Europe is about twice as expensive as in the United States and 3 times more expensive than in China. This undermines our competitiveness, especially for some industrial sectors where energy is a large cost, but also in some upcoming tech activities, such as data centers, needed for many of tomorrow's value creation. There are no silver bullets, and we also need to make the right diagnosis in order to avoid the wrong solutions. The ETS represents, on average, only 11% of the price premium. The solution does not lie here, but rather in the underlying energy sources that is used to produce electricity. Contrary to the United States, Europe is a fossil fuel importer. The ongoing crisis in the Middle East shows once again how existential it is for Europe to become more independent. Electricity is cheaper in those areas in Europe where clean, homegrown and secure energy sets the price more often. And it is higher in those areas where imported natural gas is needed instead. We must reinforce energy interconnections and ensure that exports of cheaper energy do not raise prices in the exporting member states. Working closely with the European Commission, we will examine with the sense of urgency concrete measures at our next European Council meeting in March. Fifth, Europe must protect strategic industries and reduce dependencies on defense, space, clean tech, quantum, artificial intelligence, as well as payment systems. We will map and identify our dependencies and tackle them through a diversification strategy. And on European preference, we need to use it in the selected strategic sectors in the proportionate and targeted way after an in-depth analysis to identify where it's effectively necessary and useful. A European preference that needs to respect our trade agreements, but also especially our relationship with the countries in the European Economic Area, but also our strategic defense partnerships with several countries around the world. Sixth, we must continue an ambitious and pragmatic trade policy, focused on diversification. The European Union is a global trade powerhouse. We have built the world's most extensive network of trade agreements, covering 80 partners. And we are in the process of adopting and ratifying agreements with further 27 countries. The recent agreements with Mercosur and India are two impressive game changers. Both reinforce the European Union's role as a reliable and predictable partner and as a stabilizer of the international economy. Trade deals are global rule books, tariffs are taxes on citizens and companies. Finally, Europe lacks investment. There will be no competitiveness without more investment. I have already mentioned the importance of savings and investment union, but we also need public investment. I welcome the ambition behind the Commission's proposal for a new long-term budget, MFF, and the importance of creating a powerful competitiveness fund. Public resources must also be used strategically to de-risk projects and crowd in private capital. The European Investment Bank also plays a crucial role on this. In 2025, it accounted for around 30% of venture capital debt and 24% of venture capital in the European Union market. But the scale-up gap remains. European scale-up raise about half of what their Silicon Valley peers raise and rely more on the non-European Union investors. Initiatives like ATCI and Tech EU are essential to nurture Europe's venture ecosystem, with the European Investment Bank acting as an anchor investor at the center of our capital markets. Let us build on success such as InvestEU, where €1 from the European Union budget mobilized €15 in investment. Let us limit public money intelligently to de-risk and deliver impact at scale. Ladies and gentlemen, competitiveness is not an end in itself. As Jacques Delors said, la cohésion pousse la convergence, qui enrichit le marché unique, et l'approfondissement du marché unique soutient la solidarité qui unit. Our single market reinforces our cohesion and our shared prosperity. It must serve a more affordable, cohesive, and people-centered union. A social Europe is part of our DNA. It preserves our values, our social model, and our quality of life. Strong welfare states, affordable housing, and high-quality jobs are not obstacles to competitiveness. They are its foundation. Investment in education, skills, and sustainable housing builds the productive infrastructure of our future. Last year, leaders discussed in the European Council for the very first time the challenge of affordable housing. The European Investment Bank stepped up with around €5 billion in housing financing in 2025. And I welcome the goal of delivering 1 million homes by 2030. Local, national, and European institutions must address this urgent challenge quickly. Affordable housing is at the core of people's disillusionment with democratic institutions. It is vital for social cohesion and intergenerational fairness. Okay, do you understand? You are very clever. Ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude, good news, with the words of Fernando Pessoa, the greatest Portuguese poet of the 20th century. A Europa tem sede de que se crie, tem fome do futuro. Europe thirsts to be created, it hungers for the future. It is our duty to create that future. It is time for the European Union to deliver. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Well, if intergenerational is one of the words of today, interoperable was one of the words of yesterday. So we're going to move on and we're going to talk about scaling up innovation, talent and ideas. Europe has, it's already been pointed out, world-class research, a vibrant startup economy and ecosystem. And scaling, as we know, is a challenge. Bridging the so-called second valley of death. It's essential to unlocking growth and retaining talent in Europe. So to discuss this and much more, please welcome to the stage Mariott Falkstedt, who is the Chief Executive of the European Investment Fund, and she's going to moderate this panel alongside Thomas Hellman, Professor at the Saïd Business School from the University of Oxford, Frédéric de Courtois, President of Insurance Europe, Elaine Coughlin, Founder and Managing Partner at Atlantic Bridge, Manuel Muñez, Provost at IE University, Christian Leibold, who is Managing Partner and Member of the Growth Investment Committee at Headline. Over to you, Mariott.
Thank you very much, Liza. Thank you very much. I think the President made a scene setter really nicely. Think first at scaling. Europe is a powerhouse of talent and skills and research. Now, and this is exactly where I would like to start. We will have a round of discussions, basically 2 discussion rounds. One focused at the talent and the skills. Are our talent and skills the right ones to scale? And the second round will be about financing. And each of you will have kind of 5 minutes. And please do make a sign if you would like to contribute to the views that have been expressed. And then in the end, we try to have a couple of minutes for question and answers. So if I may start with you, Thomas. And the question is, are entrepreneurs born or are they made?
That was an easy one, thank you. They're definitely made. There's no such thing as born. And people learn through the ecosystem how to become entrepreneurs. And so often we blame culture in Europe and saying we're not entrepreneurial. I don't believe that for a second. I think Europe has absolutely the talent base, and we've proven it. The EIF has done a marvelous job in creating a venture capital industry that didn't exist 25 years ago. We didn't have it. And back then, there were lots of reasons. People said that, well, why we can never do it. And they always put culture at the top, and all of that was wrong. It was just hard work. It's hard work to build a startup system. I was so delighted yesterday, even this morning, when we were supposed to talk about other things, almost every speaker spoke about scale-ups. So I think the topic of scale-up is obviously hot. I think of it as unfinished business, which is we started this venture capital revolution, but it cannot live on its own unless we also have the scale-up revolution. And we're supposed to distinguish between talent and finance, and there's no way we're going to do that, because the venture capital proved to us that it's a combination. It's an ecosystem in which talent and finance work very closely together. So maybe I can just say a couple of things on this notion that we're too risk averse, I think is too simplistic, but we do need to increase the risk tolerance of our investors. This is true at the LP level, it's true at the GP level. I think it's something that the EIB can actually help us with. Risk tolerance is one word. I actually love the word loss tolerance. We have to get used to losses. If we're going to make the investments that we need to make, we have to become investors who can live with prolonged periods of losses. Yesterday, we had the CEO of ASML telling us they lost money for 10 years, and they had investors who were willing to stand by that. For the moment, we don't have that in Europe. I've done a study, I've got very detailed evidence on Sweden, and we can show that the American investors have much greater loss tolerance. They're more willing to hold companies and go through what we call the depth of the J curve. And the number one reason in our empirical data is they have larger funds. So the initiative of building robust large funds is really important.
Thank you very much, Thomas. I will come back to that in the second round because it's really important we continue on this risk tolerance. But Manuel, I would like to come to you. And you have posted in one of your LinkedIn posts, you have said, in an era defined by geopolitical shifts, technological disruption, and economic transformation, leadership requires more than technical expertise. The question is no longer whether business is global, it is whether education in the EU is global enough. Do we have the right education to scale up?
So it's wonderful to be here. Good morning to everybody. I think that this is a very important question for universities. It's very structural. So academic institutions, if you think of the long arc of what academic institutions have been about, historically we've had two big pillars of our mission. One was creating knowledge, protecting knowledge, et cetera, over time. And then it was also transmitting, teaching, educating. But there's growingly, I think, a third pillar for us, which is really transfer. I mean, this is about applied knowledge, which ends up in patents and ends up ultimately in startups and in innovation and in the market. And I think we need to really bring this into the mission of who we are as universities. And if Europe is to be competitive in this environment, we better have academic institutions that do this very well. And this is a change to the way we function across a whole range of issues. So this is about content and treating entrepreneurship as a discipline, which many of us actually now do. So there's a lot of education. And in fact, to Thomas's point, this education of entrepreneurship, it's about the convening capacity that we have, who we sit you with in class, who we bring into the classroom. There's a lot of innovation that happens there. And also the platforms that we build. We need to be completely intertwined with platforms of investors, with platforms of innovation, with big forums of entrepreneurship. And I want to add a final reflection here that I think is very important. So we are living, as we sit in this room, through a massive transformation to the structure of the economy. One of the elements of this transformation is we are clearly witnessing the erosion of the salary economy. This is a product of tech. I think AI will greatly accelerate this process. And the enhancing of the capital and capital income economy. I mean, this is true across advanced economies. One of the fundamental features of our time, and I think this is really understudied, by the way, is the decline in labor income share in our economies. So it really pays off. It really pays off to be an entrepreneur and to be a business owner and a business starter in this century. So we are going to be, I think, universities, we should be in the business of training people that go out into the market and create businesses. And the traditional output of putting people into law firms, into consultancies, into banks, et cetera, and entry-level jobs and going up, this will not disappear overnight, but it's being weakened. So this metric we were discussing before the panel, this metric of what proportion of our graduates start a business when they graduate is going to be fundamental. In our case, in my institution, is about 30-odd, a third of our students. It's very high. But I think it'll have to be higher in the future. So this mission idea, to my point, I mean, this LinkedIn post, yes, we have to be global. We have to be very focused on entrepreneurship, innovation, transfer. This is about the utility and the future of academia, if you ask me. And we will provide a much better service to the people coming through our institutions if this is clear in our mission.
But Manuel, thank you. But how do we get there? Because your institution is a blueprint. This is how it should be done. But there are so many universities who have no education in, let's say, finance and entrepreneurship. So how do we get, in whole Europe, all these universities, high schools, whatever, into there? Do we need a government saying that each educational institution has now an incentive, and it is potentially financial literacy and then entrepreneurship?
I mean, I think it'll be a mix of things, but to be frank, the biggest force is going to be young people themselves, because they're not going to go to places that don't have this element in it. I mean, we've seen this. Young people are very clear about the life they want to live. They know the type of educational experience they want to have. So they'll discriminate institutions right off the bat. By the way, I want to add an underline, a point here, which is This is not about instrumentalizing the totality of education for market outcomes. You know, I mean, you don't need to sacrifice the humanities. In fact, having humanities content in programs is extraordinarily important, or the social science, etc. This is not an either or, which is another part of the debate, which I find to be very artificial. It's sort of like, no, but you know, this is very materialistic, connected to the market. You're subjecting the mission of academia. No, you can do all of these things. We have graduates in the humanities, we have graduates in history, we have graduates in economics and political science and other disciplines that start businesses in completely different fields. So I think this is completely aligned with the mission of academia and university, and I think the market will discriminate the institutions that are left behind in this. It's going to be a brutal next few decades for institutions that are unable to provide opportunities in the labor market and in the entrepreneurship space for the people that come through them. That's my assessment.
Maybe
Frederick.
a question to Thomas and Manuel, and a slightly provocative question. Is immigration part of the solution? I mean, does it give a boost to entrepreneurship, according to you?
Yes. Well, there's many academic studies that show that entrepreneurship is particularly high among the immigrant population, including very ambitious ventures. If I look at the universities I've been, there's no doubt that there's an extra drive. A lot of immigrant population may not have the same access to the labor market and have an incredible drive. That never comes at the exclusion of the local, because they work together. So I think they play a vital role, yes.
Can I add one line? Because I come from a country that just announced a very important measure of awarding residency permits to a very large number of people that has been very controversial outside of Spain, to be quite frank. The evidence on this that Thomas was saying is very clear. Some of the most innovative places in the world are extraordinarily diverse. By the way, this is in the name, you know, universities are called universities because they're universal in the knowledges and in the perspectives that they bring into the classroom. So we know that we're better at educating and at building innovation and transfer when we are truly diverse in terms of the ideas we bring, the people we bring into our classrooms. So it is fundamental. I mean, if we really move down this path of building very monolithic societies, the cost of this will be immense on a whole range of fields. But I'll tell you, I am certain we will be less innovative if we only fish talent from a very particular ethnic, religious pool.
Now let's continue, and the good news is that Europe has done a huge work over 2 decades in financing and funding startups. We have created plenty of startups. We are very good, we have been very strong in that. But Eileen, in terms of venture capital fund managers, now we are talking about scaling up. Are there enough and sufficient skills and talent to scale up in the venture capital ecosystem?
Thanks, Margaret, and delighted to be here, and thanks for everybody for showing up. I think that's, I say to my kids, that's 80% of life, you know. You turn up and you never know what's going to happen, and it's the same in the VC business. In terms of skills in the VC business, I actually came to the business 20 years ago from industry, from the tech industry, and I had been running founded a company. I'd been an entrepreneur of a semiconductor company, and I'd also taken a couple of companies, European Irish companies, public on the NASDAQ market. And that experience made me think I knew everything about VC. And I quickly learned I didn't know a lot, and I've been learning it over the last 20 years. So I'm reminded of what one of the investors said to me at the very beginning. They said, Elaine, training VCs, it's like training fighter pilots. You know, it costs 30 million and they crash the plane. And then they're good pilots. So I sit here today as a fighter pilot. And actually, it's really true. And at the time, I was highly indignant at him saying that. What did he know? But the truth is, what we have to do, and Christian here will attest to this, and Thomas talking about the risk tolerance. That's what that actually is. You learn a lot through both the returns, but also through the losses, through the ones that don't work out. And you also learn the combination of finance, capital, relationships with both government and private sector, the entrepreneurs, building management teams. So it's actually not so much about investing, it's about building. And their skills, and I'm really delighted to hear Thomas what he said, and also Manuel, this can be learnt. This can be learnt, right? So we can teach this. And so in my own firm in Atlantic Bridge, we've been focused always on the second layer, the third layer, the generations. And to what you were saying, you know, young people coming in, learning these skills, building an awareness of what it takes to build a company. So putting the management team together. So we invest, for instance, in deep tech. So the people I work with are 10x brighter than I am. They're geniuses, you know. They're guys like we have our astronaut from Poland, Slawa, yesterday. So you're always going to be humbled working with these people. What they tend to lack, particularly when we were talking, we run a university fund where we spin out technology. So the technical skills are brilliant. The commercial skills are weak, which is why IE and Said Business School so important to build these commercial skills, and then also the fundraising skills. They usually aren't particularly good at raising capital, and then the go-to-market skills and scaling. So the VC value add, VC have to bring that value add. They have to help. It's not exclusive. So for instance, we'll work with Christian. It takes many people to build a successful company. So no one VC can do it. And then the second thing that we are doing is we are training our next generation. So they're doing programs like the Kaufman program in the US, where we're trying to, you know, again, these skills are becoming taught, learned, and programmatic. So I think...
I just want to add, we now have in the UK the Newton program, which is built
Yes.
on the Kaufman program. But an important difference, it takes diversity much more serious. There's a huge gender problem in the venture capital industry. Minorities are represented. I think the Newton program actually is something which should have everywhere in Europe.
So have to sign up to that, Thomas. Yeah, seriously.
Thank
So
you
that's
very
what
much.
we're
It's,
doing. Thanks,
it's
Margaret.
great that you brought also gender into the game, because that is something we are very concerned in the EIF, and we really want to support to get more women into the venture capital so that we get things moving on. But we have good news, and Christian was putting some good news on LinkedIn as well, and he wrote as follows. The tech ecosystem is finally coming of age, and we see more and more companies at a growth inflection point. For the first time, many are led by former employees of European mature or exited technology companies who successfully scaled businesses and created new talent pools, entrepreneurial role models. Much remains to be done, but change is everywhere. What is the role of founders in scaling and in bringing the talent into the right place? Christian.
Yeah, I was a little scared for a moment when you picked something I wrote on LinkedIn. I thought, I'm not sure where that would go. But I think that's something I can actually really fully subscribe to. So look, I mean, what I'm excited about is the opportunity that is at hand today. And you know, there are two ways to look at it. You can think about all these changes in the economy, and I think you described them very well as a massive threat. But you can also look at it as probably the biggest opportunity for change driven by technology in our lifetime, right? And then the question is, do we have the assets? Do we have, you know, the infrastructure to build on to really come out of that much stronger? And if you think about how that can happen, it can only happen through new companies that can get started. It can only happen if we leverage the talent that comes out of the universities. And the good news is we have that talent. We have more STEM graduates than the US, whatever. I'm terrible with statistics, but I mean, I'm sure you would have the right numbers to show that we have amazing talent in Europe. And actually, if I compare to the US, and you know, we started headlining in the US 25 years ago because, you know, EIF was born around the same time. It helped us actually tremendously establish in Europe. But we wanted to, and you know, we had the benefit of being completely clueless at the time. We wanted to compete with the US VCs and see how that works. And there was just not, let's say, enough infrastructure here. But one thing that we found is that the US top universities produce amazing talent. And one thing the Americans are great at is putting that talent on stage, enabling those people with talent, with network, you know, in an ecosystem. But if you actually look at the average graduate in the US, the picture is a lot more bleak, right? The quality is not that great. You go to Europe, we're not as great at kind of, staging that tip of the pyramid and giving them all those resources. We're much more egalitarian, which has its challenges, but the good news is that actually the average quality of the graduates here is just a lot more compelling. And so what is starting to happen is that the ecosystem, and that's to the point I made on LinkedIn, is getting to a level where you start to have companies with founders that have exited once that can, kind of give back to the ecosystem, where their second, third, fourth, fifth hires are starting their own companies now. And that is the multiplier effect that we really need to develop the ecosystem at scale. Because we are still behind in the share of graduates wanting to start a business if you compare to the US. But we are at a point where the ecosystem is now strong enough, and you look at some of the clusters, like I know Arthur from Mistral is going to speak later today, I believe. You look at what's happening in AI in Paris and around there, and there is many different clusters in Europe, and it's an amazing opportunity. And AI is now getting to the level where it's cutting across industries, robotics and so on, things where Europe is traditionally very strong. And if we manage to get these founder ecosystems to kind of incentivize more people to do the same, to start companies, it can be very powerful. And I think the role of the founders is to make clear to young graduates that the best way to learn to have an incredibly rewarding and fast developing career is in a startup. Either you join one at its earliest stages or you start your own business, and then failure is okay. That's something that, over the last 20 years has thankfully changed. And, I think you took a very optimistic stance on that. I still struggle sometimes in Europe that, people say taking risks is a little, starting a company and so on is risky, and what happens if it doesn't work? Screw it. I mean, in the US, it's a badge of honor, right? And I think this is where we need to still get to, where there is a lot of work to be done. And I ask myself that as a parent. My oldest son is now, starting university, and at some point maybe he's going to ask me like, Dad, should I join XYZ or try to join XYZ or start a business? And ask yourself, what would you answer to your own kids, right? And I think that has to be a very clear answer. And the good thing is founders are the best evangelists of that. And that's why I think we're at a great inflection point where big technology shift, maturity in the ecosystem, lots of ingredients we need to enhance. We can talk about that more, but there is an incredible opportunity.
It's so good to hear. Manuel, you wanted to?
Yeah, just a very quick point that is, I think, on the optimistic side, but it's about founders, and you were asking me about the global nature of universities. So when academic institutions are well built, and the US is a perfect example of this, they become magnets for talent from all over the world. And you can train them, and then they can start their businesses here, and then they stay, and they build very complex ecosystems of innovation further down the line beyond their first startup. In our case, it's close to 90% of our students are non-Spanish. So they come from all over the world. But then a larger proportion of that stay in Europe, and they build their businesses here. And there's a window now. I think there are at least two elements to this window. One is we're seeing restrictive measures to international education across the world. And this is not just Trump. I mean, Trump has implemented a number of measures on visa issuance, on the transit from a student visa to a work visa, the H-1B visa issue. He just increased the cost of work visas in the US by quite a bit. But it's not just the US. Canada has imposed a cap on international student visas. The UK has also introduced restrictive measures on visa holders for spouses. Australia. So there's a concert. It's a product of the growing nationalism in our politics that is affecting higher ed. So this is a 4-lane highway for continental European institutions to really internationalize. I mean, I haven't seen this, and by the way, not just on students, because many of these measures affect faculty and researchers, particularly in the US. And people forget, but the US research ecosystem was built at the end of the Second World War, fundamentally, through the movement of a lot of European human capital to the US. This is what created a lot of the research departments in the US, the DARPAs of the US. So, I mean, this is a huge opportunity. And the second is the AI revolution, which I'm sure we'll touch on. But this is an infrastructure. I mean, this is equivalent at the very least to the launch of the internet. There'll be so many businesses, so many built on top of the LLMs, in particular industries with services. So, I mean, if you ask me, you're sitting in Europe, we have this huge opportunity to bring talent from all over the world, educated, and be part of this huge wave of innovation that is right in front of us, right? So that's a positive.
That is wonderful, and we have many more opportunities. We have also Savings and Investment Union, which is an opportunity to boost households' wealth, isn't it? So we need the financing for all these innovative companies, but and we have retail investors who could do that. There are some 12 trillion deposits and cash in Europe out there, and maybe some 8 trillion deposits that could be invested maybe differently. Now, but what is the situation of the financial literacy of our retail investors and households? How would you comment that, Frederick?
Thank you. Good morning. I came with two good news and a big question mark. I'll start with the good news. The first good news is we are all aware of what the starting point is. If I look at the glass half full, we know that we have a lot of savings, we have a lot of talents. We know that we've done well over the past 10 years. I mean, the startup ecosystem in Europe has grown dramatically. It has been multiplied by about 10. We have 300 unicorns. So we have a lot of good stuff. On the glass half empty, first, we know that we have a lot of savings, but it's partially invested in the US. These are the famous 300 billion invested every year in the US. We have a lot of savings, but we don't have long-term savings in risky assets. As a consequence, we don't have financing for our scale-up. As a consequence, our founders and talents are moving to the US or they are moving abroad. So again, the issue is quite clear. The second good news is we know what the solutions are. There have been tons of reports on this, and I will not make an exhaustive list, but the first topic, and you've discussed this, is financial literacy is poor. We need to act. Let's be honest, it will take time, but we need to act on this. The second big topic is we have too much regulation in Europe. You wouldn't expect something else from me. We have too much regulation in Europe. And in addition, member states are gold-plating on the European regulation. And the European regulation is not applied everywhere in the same way. A third topic is that investing in risky assets in Europe requires a lot of capital. It improves. For insurance company, the new move on Solvency II has been a positive one, but yes, it is costly. But I'd like to especially highlight the two following ones. The first one is, and our President Costa mentioned it, we need a savings and investment union. And here I see a lot of awareness, a lot of good intentions, but it's moving extremely slowly. And if you ask me what the design is, what is the vision, what is the final point, I don't know. I don't know. And I'm not sure anybody really knows what the savings and investment union is. I mean, we know about a few stuff, a few chapters, but we don't know. And my last topic on the solutions is to my point on the savings and to my point on we don't have long-term savings in Europe. Yes, the insurance sector can do more. We have a 10 trillion balance sheet. Yes. We should be a bit humble. BlackRock manages more than 10 trillion assets. BlackRock alone. So when we say the insurance industry has 10 trillion assets, yes, it seems big, but we should be a bit humble. Issue is, so we can do more, issue is that for the insurance industry, investment in scale-up and startups doesn't fit so well our liabilities. I mean, we have liquidity constraints, we have capital constraints, we give guarantees. So again, we can do more. It will probably not be a game changer. What we need at the end in Europe is we need pension funds. We need pension funds. We have some. They are small across Europe. We need pension funds with no liquidity constraints. We need pension funds with little guarantees so that we can invest in risky assets. So again, to come back to financial literacy, yes, I can convince each individual citizen in Europe to invest in startups. It's better if I have big pension funds investing well for their retirement. So again, two good news. We know what the issue is, and we have a list of solutions, and we know what we have to do. The big question mark is, are we, between Europe, national states, and the industry, are we going to work together? Are we going to be smart enough? Are we going to be courageous enough to implement them? This is a matter of implementation. It's not about reinventing the wheel. We know what we have to do. We need to move to the implementation phase. Thank you.
Thank you. This is an excellent bridge because we need action. This is exactly the point, which brings me then to Thomas. In fact, is our financing gap a cultural gap? Are we too humble? Are we not working well together? What's the issue?
If we say it's a cultural gap as an excuse for not doing it, no, it's not a cultural gap. I think there are, our culture does need thinking. Funny enough, I think just to build on the financial literacy, I think where the financial literacy is most needed, and I'm probably going to make myself unpopular in this audience, is in the pension fund industry itself. It is fundamentally misstructured. It is supposed to save for the next generation. It isn't. It is using 10 years backward-looking returns data as a main investment criteria when it should be looking at the future, and it's using IRRs, which overemphasize short-term over long-term returns. So I think there is a big problem there. I think there's more to be done on the scale-up gap. My biggest issue is that it is dangerous to just think of this as a financing problem, which is we have financing. We have lots of financing for medium-sized companies. I think the mistake we're likely to make is to think of scale-ups as normal companies. They're not normal companies. We understand that startups are different. Startups are like kids, and we know that kids are different. Scale-ups are like moody teenagers. If you want to remember one thing, moody teenagers need a different treatment. And I think it's going to be really important that we have the right expertise at the venture capital level and that we have an equity mindset. We cannot solve the scale-up problem with that, in my opinion. We have to have equity-like instruments. Savings and Capital Union is part of that, but also at the private stage, we need funds that are investing over 10-year horizons with lots of risk.
If I may, on my side, I think this is mostly a finance topic. This is
Excellent.
mostly a finance topic because, we have the money, and we know that in Europe, we mostly invest in short-term savings. If I take the example of France, for instance, we know that where people invest in the livret A because this is guaranteed by the state, full liquidity, and so on. So we invest in short-term savings, and we invest in government bonds. Yes. So at the end, we need, this is a finance topic, we need to invest long-term in risky assets. I will not invest in VC if I want to have my money back in 1 year from now. So I think this is a finance topic, and this is a question. Yes, we can work on the culture, but the culture will take time. It's a question of pipes. We need to move the assets to the right asset class.
And just to clarify, I think it's a finance issue, but let's not confuse that as a banking issue. We don't need a banking mentality.
I agree.
Please, Christian, and then I come to
Maybe just a little comment, let's say, from the front lines of fundraising for venture capital. So I never like to say, fundraising is hard and, we should get all this money because ultimately it's our job to convince investors that it's a great investment, right? And I think it's only fair for investors to be very critical and also understand, let's say, the risk and the downsides and all of that. Having said that, what is striking to me, I'm going to pick on German pension funds because I'm German, so I'm allowed to do that. Our first German pension money came through an American fund of fund that was in the same building as our San Francisco office. So the German pension money went to San Francisco, paid the fees and carried there, and then that fund of fund determined that actually investing in our European fund would be a great way to invest that capital, right? And that just tells you something about the lack of, understanding, time spent, and dedicated resources in those pension teams, because they say, okay, venture seems to be a great thing, let's give it to an American fund of fund and let them figure out where to put it, which obviously is going to bias massively to the US. At the same time, you look at, all the big American funds, whether it's Sequoia, A16Z, or whatever, opening offices in Europe. Apparently, they deem that to be a great place to put US pensioners' money. So the only ask that I would have, I don't know if any one of you is happening to manage pension money, is to just at least have a team dedicate some resources, hire 1 or 2 people that are looking at venture and growth investing so that you have that expertise in-house and you're not reliant on the large capital aggregators, which all happen to be American. So that you can actually make that choice and figure out, whether there are attractive opportunities in Europe. The colleagues up in the Nordics and in the Benelux countries, they're actually doing that to a significant extent already. So I think there are role models within Europe, but there are many countries where that's really not happening at all. And then I think the other point is the folks whose money get invested, I think are increasingly asking also whether that money is all going to the US. And we do have one fantastic German pension fund that's for a large German corporate. And I'm pretty sure that one of the reasons that investing in European venture capital is attractive for that pension fund is that if they have to answer to their employees where their money is going, the answer 90% is going to the US, where all our competitors are, is not a great one. So reinvesting money into the economy that is creating the jobs that are paying the pensions, I think is fundamentally also a good idea. And so my ask would just be to at least spend the time on the asset class.
I really love that, and I would like all of you comment on it, in fact. It's really fantastic. But before getting there, Eileen, I have a question to you. As a venture capitalist, what has it taken to scale up all those companies? What have been the challenges, and where have you seen the opportunities? What does it take for you to scale?
So we have about 150 companies across the portfolio, and we have 50 of them at very early, actually at the spin-out stage, commercialization of research, really intensive, where we took a different approach, and actually the EIF was the anchor investment in that fund 10 years ago, and it was a bit of a pilot. Sorry now for more fighter jet analogies, but it was, we didn't know whether it was going to work. And we took a much more intense commercial approach to commercialization of research. And 10 years on, so we started off with 2 universities. We now have 6 universities investing. We have 30 universities across Europe on the platform. We have 5,000 researchers. We put 100 million into the companies, and they raised 1.2 bill, right, which is now heading to about 1.5. So that's not nearly as good as your 15x multiplier margin, but it's not bad. It's 12x, which is phenomenal, okay? Have to work a little bit harder, get it up to the 15 that Antonio Costa talked about. But that is phenomenal. So what does it take? It takes a lot of capital. That's the truth, to build these deep tech companies, right? So if I look at my own fund, Atlantic Bridge, we've got $1.5 billion under management, right? But it's an impressive number, but it's also a sad number. We've $4.5 billion heading to $5 billion of co-investment with 450 partners around the world. I kiss a lot of frogs to get the prince, We work hard to bring the capital in to kind of crowd in that capital, increase that multiplier. So I do actually really believe, Frederick, capital is a huge part of this scale up, both for the funds, and you heard Christian talking about the German pension funds. I mean, my experience in 2 experiences, one in Ireland where we had Irish pension funds, and they said to me, Elaine, we had a great experience, we made money with you, but the pension regulator here is telling us we need to be sitting in bonds. We need to be in bonds. So really sorry about that. You know, we can't break the law. So that was one example. And you have the other side of the Irish government saying we want you to invest in innovation, and the other side saying we want to regulate. And then in the UK, where I sit on British Business Bank's investment committee, one of the initiatives they've done there is the Mansion House Compact, to get the pension funds in with the VCs, with the bank. Really interesting. We brought them to our flagship event a couple of weeks ago. They're 3 years working on it, okay? 3 years. It moves very slowly. Okay, that's okay. I understand that. But we finally got to a position where they're putting $500 million into a fund of fund, along with the anchor, which is BBB. And I hope they have a great experience and they will get great exposure to the VC. So now that took us, you know, I think the British thought they could do that really quickly. Sitting in London, we've trillions of pension investment, and they were quite underwhelmed, you know, at the length of time it took. But I still think it's time well spent, because now they're at the table. So I do think bringing in, so for us as an asset class, to what Christian said, we have to get out there and sell the asset class, and it's a phenomenal asset class. And when people, including you, talked about the employees in the EIF, you know, that want to invest in these companies, because it's phenomenal to make the financial return, but it's even more rewarding to see employees, to see homegrown talent, to see companies rooted in their community, to see generations of knowledge going from founder to, as you were saying, Christian, the next generation, you know, to start bringing that talent back into the universities, to work alongside you, to educate the next generation. So for me, I really feel that piece, along with working really closely with the EIF and EIB. I mean, that's a huge strength that we have in Europe, that we have you guys. It's huge. And I think together, the VC industry, EIF, pension, you know, we've got to do this together. We can't force them to do it. They need to want to do it and should want to do it.
But how can we help them more? We, for example, started publishing our performance data on venture capital. So we show the vintages over the years. It's called Track VC. It's publicly available. So no institutional investor has now an excuse not having performance data. It's there. So what is then the next excuse that we have to tackle? And how do we, Manuel, how do we bring a citizen so far that the citizen wants that his or her pension and even the insurance payments that are being done are invested in productive use in Europe to increase our productivity, to increase Europe's competitiveness? How do we get there?
So this brings us to a much broader question, I think, which is part of the framing of this gathering, sort of a strong Europe in a changing world. And President Costa mentioned this, which I think is the real. I mean, this is not such an optimistic comment, but I'm a political scientist. So someone told me the other day that if you say negative things, pessimistic things, you sound intelligent. But if you're optimistic, you make money, you know? So I'm not sure, I'm sort of straddling the two. But on this, which is the politics of Europe, I really worry, because in most of the discussions, and I know this is true at the level of the European Council, I think that is it's evident to me that in Europe we face a real fork in the road in the next few years. And I think we will look back 5, 6, 7 years from now, and we will assess the decisions that we made to either integrate Europe across a whole range of fields or break up and weaken the European project. And this is really down to decisions by the Commission, by the Council, by our institutions, national elections, and the results of elections. And you can complicate this analysis as much as you want, but I think really we have two paths. One path takes us down what Mario Draghi and Enrico Letta have stated, what many of us in this panel have defended, which is essentially a deepening of the single market across a whole range of spaces, the digital single market, the savings and investment union. This would, on the topic of today, it would give us the ability to innovate. I mean, I'm not sure how you can build a healthy innovation ecosystem in Europe if we're broken up. It's hard enough as it is right now with a single currency in most of these places, with the willingness of our institutions to basically iron out inefficiencies in the single market. So imagine if we had this rise of the extremes, I mean, particularly the extreme right in Europe, and they start breaking up elements of this, let alone impeding forward movement on this. But this is true in the single market. It's true in the foreign and security agenda as well, I mean, where we have huge challenges. So one path is deepening, and the other is really fracturing of the project. And if we fracture the project, and we will get an answer to this question, I tell you, in the next few years, I think this will commit Europe to a path of huge intervention and dependency on others. We will become the objects of foreign policy, and our interests, economic and otherwise, will be basically decided and transacted by others outside of Europe. This is a circumstance that Europe has not endured in a very long time. It's very unique to this moment. So this is what's pivotal, if you ask me. And it speaks to your citizens' question, and it speaks to the support. I think our function, and I'll finish on this, and I'm pretty sure most of the people in this room are actually pretty convinced about this, so maybe we have to preach this in many other places, is that the cost of taking the wrong path will be huge for the next generation. We will commit a number of generations of Europeans to this dependency on others if we don't make the right decisions. And one of the metrics will be this innovation, our capacity to attract talent, our capacity to scale innovation. This will be undone. And by the way, I find it outrageous that some of the political movements that are defending this use the label of patriots, because I think there are few things that are less patriotic today than to convey to Europeans that they will be better off in 27 dwarf states trying to do these very difficult things, scaling, innovating, and others, in these tiny polities around Europe. So this is the challenge. I'm sorry, because I know you wanted a much more micro, but this is the macro stuff that is the background to this exchange.
I like micro because I believe...
Thank you.
I very much believe at the bottom-up power, and I hope that our innovation capacity is the bottom-up power that keeps, Europe becoming stronger and stronger. Christian, you wanted to comment on this one.
Yeah, you hit a nerve for me there, because, one of the questions I very often get, especially from our US investors, are around sort of the differences in scaling a company in Europe and the US. And to be fair, the disadvantage we have is that if you take a company to, let's say, 50 million revenue, your organization is going to be a lot more complex than in the US. Because by the time you get there, if you're selling, let's say, enterprise software in Europe, you're dealing with a number of different jurisdictions. You probably have different country offices, people that speak a different language. Your product has to be multi-language, multi-currency, multi-jurisdiction, multi-whatnot. So, it's just a much more complex org. Whereas in the US, I mean, all you got to do is work across a couple time zones, and, everything is US dollars. Everything is one jurisdiction. You get sued a lot, but still, overall, it's a lot simpler, right? And so that's a disadvantage we have. The good news is the critical talent is much cheaper in Europe, right? So your R&D is actually cheaper by at least a factor of 2, right? If you just compare salaries between Silicon Valley and even, graduates of top European schools, there is a massive gap. So the question is, if we go towards a path of really creating more of a unified market, and you can reduce some of that organizational complexity, but you actually benefit from the lower cost of research and development, you can actually really increase competitiveness. If we do the opposite and we make it more complicated in Europe to operate across borders, we're screwed. It's very simple. Because with AI, if you think about it, it's just going to accelerate how fast you can build companies. You're going to have to be international from day one. You look at the successful ones, they all are. If we kind of, if we put barriers in that path of internationalizing for European entrepreneurs, we're screwed. So that's a really critical point. I think we have to make sure we operate on a European scale. We have to compete with the US and China. There is, trying to make a difference between Germany and France and putting money left or right is just silly. Yeah.
Let's work out the European dream. European dream of very strong scale-up companies, the most innovative ones becoming European world leaders in their area. Let's work on a dream that we can reduce let's say, improve the risk appetite, improve our risk tolerance. Let's work on a dream that we get the retail investors better into the system. That we have a European 28th regime that helps our corporates. How would you see then Europe being? What is then the next problem? Because I think, Christian, you will come to exits.
So, yeah, I think, let's assume we get all that right, which is a lot, but it would be fantastic, yeah? The focus we've had also in the discussion so far is very much around sort of enabling investment and making sure we kind of put the infrastructure in place for that, right? The one thing I don't like to talk about, especially when I talk to American investors, is the exit landscape. Because the challenge that we do have, and I personally think that's still a big Achilles heel, is our public markets, our capital markets in Europe are not strong enough to really, at this point in time, be the right exit platform for a lot of those companies. So if we want companies to not only grow up in scale in Europe, but to stay in Europe, we really have to have public markets that can sustain that and that have the liquidity. And you know, I mean, our job is to make money for our investors. And so today, if a founder in Europe asks me where to take his company public, it is very hard to make the argument and say that you should take it public in wherever, you know, pick your city in Europe. Because ultimately, the depth of liquidity, the set of investors that are interested in your roadshow, is just so much bigger in the US. And this is another reason where I think if we're too kind of national and we don't create a unified platform at European scale that has the liquidity for these companies, it will just be very hard to sustain that flywheel. Because don't forget, part of why the US is so successful is that they really kind of keep that capital flywheel alive at all the different stages. Private markets, exit to the public markets, comes back into the private markets. You know, it's working. And this is something that I think will take a lot of energy still in Europe because we have to really rise above the national level to figure out a way to create capital markets that can, let's say, honor the companies that are growing in Europe, giving them a real reason to stay, a financial reason to stay. And then if we get there, you know, then I'm looking forward to waking up from the dream because, I mean, then I think we're in a fantastic place. And we have the assets, we have the infrastructure. We've got great companies coming down the pike, but we have to make sure we also cover that side of the medal. Yeah.
That is so right. And I see Thomas and Frederick wanted to comment.
I just want to add a piece to the puzzle that I find is very puzzling, which is if you look at the way that the American biggest companies, the Googles of the world, grew, it is by acquisitions. We don't have very active acquirers in Europe. I don't fully understand it, I don't know, but I definitely think it's a solvable problem. I understand the EIB is interested in this issue. I think that's a really important wake-up call. Part of it is that often the acquirers are in Europe but in a different country. And so, you know, the chances that as a French company you're going to find a French acquirer is something, but a European acquirer, the probability goes up dramatically. I think it's something we need to work on because ironically, it's the exit for those companies who shouldn't grow and it is the growth opportunities for those companies that really should grow. We haven't gotten that equation right yet.
Excellent, and indeed, we are working on that. Frederick, please.
So on the dream, I think thanks to the good work done over the past 2 years, the dream is quite clear. And to come back to what I've said, I think it's all about make it happen. And I'll take one example. Part of the Savings and Investment Union is on mid-term savings and long-term savings. And the Commission has issued 2 good reports over the past 3 months, one on mid-term savings, so the savings account, and one on long-term savings, so mostly pension funds. And the reports are good, they make sense, they are only recommendation. Now it's up to the member states to decide what they are doing. And if you ask me, I have no clue of what they are going to do. So we have two good reports, make sense, they may stay in a cupboard.
Thank you very much. Now I am very much conscious of time. I know that we have to shorten a bit, isn't it? Could continue this discussion about exits and indeed what the member states could do. But let's open the floor for questions. If you have questions, yes, and I see there are a few. There are in fact many. Good. Now I cannot see very well. Who has first the mic? Please, if you could introduce yourself, it would be nice. Thank you.
Yes. Hello. My name is Daniela Maier. I'm from Romania, from an IR investor relations advisory company. We do work with many founders, entrepreneurs, and one angle we haven't discussed, or maybe I would like to see your view. Much of the conversation is around scaling through venture capital. Yet many companies that reach profitability need growth capital without further equity dilution. Do you see private credit and structured debt becoming a larger part of the capital stack for European scale-ups? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I may start commenting on that. When the Capital Markets Union back in 2021, there was a report about it. Private credit was a very important part of it because the problem was that the banks were not financing startup companies, technology companies. But how do you see that, Christian and Eileen?
I think around a quarter of the market today is now private credit. I think the EIF has done a great job on funding a lot of private credit funds. I think for the question about profitable companies, I think venture debt and private credit is a really good product. For the type of companies, some of them that we're talking about today, it plays a role, but really it's equity. Equity is what these companies need. To what Frederick said, the timelines to build these companies is 10 years plus, you know? So credit can have a small part, but you can't have the clock ticking at 8 or 10%. You know, it absolutely kills returns. It kills the company. And then, if you remember Peter yesterday from ASML, he said the company was going bust at one stage. The investors stuck with it. They had 120 million in it. If you've got debt and something like that, you lose it. You lose the company. So I think it has a really important role to play for those SMEs and those profitable companies that need growth capital to expand and export overseas, etc. It's a nice product for that, but I don't see it becoming, you know, I wouldn't like to see it becoming 50% of our market because what our companies need is equity.
I think it's a fantastic question, and you know, a friend of mine in the US is running a very successful credit fund, and he was telling me, wow, that's the next great product for the Europeans and for the Germans. And that's because his point was they love annuities. And they think annuities mean low risk. And you go back to 2008, and you think about who were taking some of the biggest losses from Lehman, it was the Germans. Because German, you know, local communities bought those bonds because they thought, you know, they're annuities, they fit into our regulatory frameworks, and they are low risk, but we're maximizing the coupon. And so I would just, in general, be a little bit critical of that asset class because it's perceived low risk, but there are, if you look at some of the big shifts, kind of the SaaS repricing in the public markets right now, there are real risks in there. It is an incredibly important product for companies that are scaling, but in combination with equity. Tell me one truly successful public company that hasn't, you know, taken on equity in the US. Like, I think that's why I love the question. I think the big part here in Europe is like, we have to believe that building an equity story is part of success. And that means taking on outside capital. Outside capital is not a bad thing. Working with funds of any color is an, you know, incredibly important piece on making your company big. And too often in Europe, I still see founders that say, I've bootstrapped my business, I don't want outside money because I want to stay in control, I want to own 100%, so that is great. no, you know, it's great to own 100% of a gas station, but it's a lot better to have 2% of Shell. And that's the mindset that we need. And so, you know, that's why I think equity is something where we just really have to make sure people understand the power of equity capital, and then debt can be a fantastic accelerator.
Thank you very much. Now, if I may ask you to stand up if you have a question. I see Anna here, for example, from DG Research has a question or comment.
Hello, my name is Anna Krzyżanowska. I'm the advisor for the Startup and Scale-Up Task Force at the Commission. So of all the events and all the sessions in this fantastic event, this is by far the most interesting to me. Thank you very much for your interesting observations. I would like just to bring one element and ask one question. As an advisor, I speak to a lot of startups and scale-ups, and there is one dominating grumble, and that is Europe is complicated. We do not know where to start when we're looking for resources. They all know that resources exist. They are in the private sector. They are overwhelmingly in the public sector. The public sector is 30% financier of startups in Europe. But it is very difficult to access them. So they tell me, you know, you need a PhD to find them. You either need to become a consultant to hire one. As a result, University of Bocconi says it's 10 times more expensive to fail in Europe than in the US. It is also, therefore, much more expensive to grow. So my question is, do we need a hyperscaling platform for the companies to find, compare, and access resources that they need to thrive and grow? At the moment, we see these platforms emerging. Amazon is solving problems for retailers. TripAdvisor is solving problems for people who want to travel and have fun. We do not have it for innovators. Do we need a TripAdvisor for innovators?
Good question, thank you.
I think it's a great question. It's a really great question. And actually, only yesterday, the EIF reached out to me and said somebody had contacted them. They'd given them a list of all of the funds in Europe. And this guy, this entrepreneur, had gone off and he'd contacted 500 funds, okay? And they were apologizing to me. And I said, no, don't apologize. It's okay. It's actually hand-to-hand combat, what we have to do here. Every single one of us that's in the industry has to be paying it forward, available and open to giving those entrepreneurs and founders that are seeking the way forward, help them find the door, okay? Whether it's me, whether it's Christian, whether it's DIF, that's the first thing. So the second thing, I talked about showing up. You know, last year Margaret brought a big delegation to Ireland to look at defence and companies and quantum. And, you know, they came out, they met one of our quantum companies. They were in the middle of trying to get EIC funding. That visit was hugely important to catalysing the interest in the company with the sovereign in Ireland, then with the EIC, then we got a 60 million round done. We might now get it to 100 million. That's the soft power of the EIF, and I think we now have to move further. So we can't just put up these platforms and programs, and there's lots of them. We actually also now have to go out and sell them and show people how you access, how you onboard, and hold our hand into the door. Can't just leave them at the cliff. So I think it's a great question, and I understand that frustration. So I think all of us have a responsibility to open the door, yeah, on the path.
Thank you very much. I hear that we have time for 2 more questions.
Yes, thank you. Eugen Pajc-Karegaba, CEO of Dalekovod, so now in the energetics, used to be responsible for the largest banking retail operation in Croatia, so 1 million clients roughly. So one comment and then question. Basically, coming from banking to a company that is building overhead transmission line. So basically being now responsible for the lives of the people that are climbing 80 meters in the high in order to wire the overhead transmission line. I have much less regulation than when I was in the banking, so responsible for basically losing 10 million euro loan or something like that. So I think it speaks for itself. But And then I'm coming back to the question of financial literacy, which I find very, very important. So at one side in the banking, banks are obliged to make a financial score of every customer that wants to invest in even a money market fund. And at the end of the day, banks are responsible, so if there are losses, states will step in, etc., etc. On the other side, we had the IPO of Uber, as we all know, $45 per share, initial valuation of 82 billion, if I remember well. The very next day, it's dropped 7% and never recovered to that amount. So if we are saying Europe, financial literacy in Europe compared to financial literacy in the US, if you can elaborate a little bit more on that. So where we really want to come with the capital markets in the Europe compared to the overregulation on one side, and basically, are we ready to Europeans to take responsibility for their own actions when it comes to the investments? So that is the question. Thank you.
It is a very good one. Are citizens ready to take the responsibility?
Look, I mean, first of all, I think the positive of Uber, I'm aware of 3 ex-Uber employees who actually built a fantastic company in Croatia in the global tax management space. So that's one positive thing that has come out of it, and actually a testament to how great startups can actually form in all places in Europe, right? But to your question, I think, and that again also applies particularly to Germany, the big challenge that we have is that the way that we have worked in our retail banking systems or in retail distribution has always been where, you know, the banks take a commission. And so they're very motivated to really take the customer by the hand and sell the highest commission product. We don't have a pension system like in the US with the 401ks or whatever, where just people put money into a Vanguard index fund. And then they can actually totally live with the Uber IPO going up and down. Germans, you know, still talk to me about the Deutsche Telekom stock that went out in '99. And then, you know, that's the one stock they ever bought in their life and it lost all its value. And since they're never going to, you know, touch stocks again. So I think what we need is a much broader reform of the retail sector that drives towards self-responsible investing for wherever it's long-term. And to be honest, when you look at very simple mechanisms that basically say you can only take out the money when you're 60, and you know maybe there is a set of funds below a certain cost ratio that are electable, you know, it's pretty easy to implement that. There is the case of the AP funds in Sweden. So I think actually changing the pension system on the retail side to that and motivating people to put money into that and make that a savings tool. You look at it how it's done in Switzerland, you know, with the different pillars, they have that where they motivate you to put savings into there and then it's tax advantage. There's lots of great cases across Europe, and I hope it's okay to count Switzerland and Europe here, where we can see how you can do that. And then you look at exchange-traded funds, you know, long-term public market participation is the best thing you can do as an individual. And if we get there only a little bit, it will actually do tremendous, have tremendous benefits for a lot of European savers.
Frederick, please.
Yeah, I only very partially believe in the financial literacy topic and retail investing to solve our issues. It will take ages. If you look at what happened over the past 20 years, I mean, people, if you ask retail investors, they want liquidity, they want guarantee. This is what they've done in Europe. They've lost tons of money compared to what happened in the US. I believe more in institutional investing. I mean, you need to have good asset managers investing for the long term, for the pension of our citizens in Europe, knowing that if you take risk over 50 years, it will be a good investment. So this is my main focus. Again, financial literacy, I'm not against it, but it will not solve our problems over the next 10 years with financial literacy and retail investing.
Very clear, thank you. Last question.
Thank you. Shifra Dixon, I work on European financing at the UK mission to the EU in Brussels. I wanted to ask about the structural factors which are underpinning the lack of finance for late-stage startups. It seems to me there's a mismatch between the finance available in Europe and the finance that's needed. We have a situation where the European public financial institutions and also private investment firms are tending towards loan and lower risk financing, whereas what companies need is equity and VC financing. So my question is, what can we do to de-risk on both sides and make it possible for public financial institutions to do more on equity and companies to de-risk their ability to use credit financing?
Okay, thank you. I would say we are doing, since a couple of years, a lot in Europe. We launched the European Tech Champions initiative to create the equity funds who are sizable enough to support all the scale-ups out there with European funding. I think this is, that has been an important step that we want to continue, and we have to continue to keep the ball rolling. But what about the risk sharing between the credit, so to say, the banks and the let's say, the public sector, if I understood correctly? Do you have any views on this type of question?
I'd just say my experience with banks is it's very difficult for them to invest the amount of capital they have to put aside under Basel rules, etc., for high-risk assets that are, 10-year length. I do think on the public side, huge progress has been made, as you said, some of those programs. And what we have to do now is lean in and more into those programs, because if you look at the numbers, Europe is about, the US is about 4 times the size of our VC market, 4x. So they're investing 4x at our pace. It used to be 5x, by the way, so it's improved a little bit. If you look at the numbers now, last year in 2025, the VC market in Europe was $85 billion. I just say it in dollars to compare it with the US. US is about 350, so it's about 4x, right? They're not 4x the size of our population. We're bigger. They're not 4x the size of our grads. We have a really strong line of grads in terms of qualifications. So fixing that 4x, and if we look this year, the 85 billion, in 25, for the first time it's ahead of China. China's 53. It's not many things we're ahead of China in. So we're actually, it's up about 10%, right? It's up. So some of these programs are actually beginning to pay dividends. But again, Thomas was talking about moody teenagers. We have to be patient, yeah? We have to be patient here. It is going to take time. But I would just say to you, on the equity side, on the public market side, we've made great progress.
I think we are in a very good path as regards to the European dream to scale up our innovation and our innovation capabilities, to create the European champions and the world champions. So thank you very much. We will build on your ideas, and we will certainly meet again next year and see where we stand then, because we have to make action, isn't it? Immediately. Thank you very much. Thank you. Applause.
Thank you very much. You can just stay there for 1 minute, actually, because I won't take much time. We are going to go into a coffee break, but I would encourage you to be in your seats for 11:30, because we have Kyriakos Pyrkakis, President of the Eurogroup, who is going to talk at 11:30. And we also have our Arthur Mensch coming up just before lunchtime from Mistral.
et.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm just going to encourage you all to take a seat as soon as possible because we have a very packed session before lunchtime. We have a wonderful keynote speech coming up with Kyriakos Pierakakis from Eurogroup, and then we have a panel discussion on digital finance, cryptos, and the Savings and Investment Union that's been mentioned many times over the last day and a half. And then we have a keynote speech and a Q&A with Arthur Mensch from Mistral AI. So please take a seat as soon as possible. We really want to start on time. So again, I can see the doors are still open. You have 1 minute to come and sit down, and then we will close the doors and we will start on time for everybody involved in the keynote speeches and the upcoming panel. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for being in the room. And we have a really wonderful set of speakers coming up in this section. So we're going to invite, first of all, and it's a great honor to have Kyriakos Pliakakis, President of Eurogroup and Minister of Economy and Finance of the Hellenic Republic. So thank you very much for coming to Luxembourg and delivering this keynote speech. And following that, we will have a panel discussion, also with wonderful speakers, on digital finance, cryptos, and the Savings and Investment Union. But first of all, please welcome to the stage President Pliakakis.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, President Calveño, dear Nadia, distinguished guests. It's a pleasure to join you today at the European Investment Bank Forum, a cornerstone of Europe's investment capacity and a symbol of our ability to transform common ambition into concrete projects, exactly what the remit, the scope, the mission of the EIB is. We meet at a moment when developments in the Middle East have escalated markedly, with repercussions now reaching even Europe's shores. What is unfolding amounts to an unprecedented and deeply concerning crisis, placing significant strain on an already fragile international order. At a time when geopolitical shocks are multiplying, our economies have no room for complacency. For Europe, the stakes are both economic and strategic. This is a matter of strength, a matter of autonomy, and a matter of resilience. The Middle East lies at the heart of global energy flows and critical trade corridors. When instability reaches this core, the consequences are immediate and the consequences are measurable. Energy prices rise, transportation and insurance costs increase. Of course, the full scale of the impact will be a function of the duration of this crisis. It will largely depend on it. That is where the real effects on shipping, supply chains, and investor confidence will become evident. The longer uncertainty persists, the wider the economic footprint of the crisis will be. But to be frank, the era of geopolitical innocence is over. Europe's sovereignty is no longer an abstract ambition. It is a condition for economic survival and institutional strength. It is our capacity to absorb external shocks, to safeguard our energy security, to protect our productive base and capacity build it, and to act early, collectively, and decisively. What is required now is a clear sense of urgency, with the full understanding that in times of crisis, time is never a neutral variable. Europe possesses the tools to shape events and to reaffirm its strategic power. The EIB is a preeminent tool amongst those tools. We must move swiftly and in coordination in order to ensure that it does. Europe has proven its resilience in many occasions in the past. We have absorbed financial turmoil, sovereign debt stress, a pandemic, and an energy shock. We protected our societies when it was needed to do so. We stabilized our economies. We acted together when it mattered the most. But resilience is not a growth strategy. Today, Europe faces a structural competitiveness problem. Productivity growth has lagged for too long, and the gap with the United States has widened over 2 decades, while at the same time, demographic headwinds are becoming significant economic constraints. By 2040, Europe's workforce could shrink by close to 2 million people per year. And this is evident, I would say, in most member states of the European Union. It's certainly evident in Greece, where I come from. That matters because it changes the equation significantly. Growth can no longer rely on expanding labor supply in the same manner that it did in the previous decades. It must come from higher productivity. And higher productivity comes from innovation, from investment, and from efficient capital allocations. Put it simply, the growth model that supported European prosperity for decades has reached its limits. So the strategic task in front of us is quite clear. We must mobilize capital more efficiently, more effectively, in order to finance innovation, in order to achieve scale. That is the only lever that can raise productivity at the time frame that we wanted to, increase incomes, strengthen strategic autonomy, and build resilience, further build resilience. Europe does not suffer from a lack of savings, as we often discuss in the context of the whole project called the Savings and Investment Union. We suffer from a lack of mobilization of those savings and vis-à-vis how to channel them into strategic investments. Every year, Europeans save roughly 1.4 trillion euros, and too much of it remains in low-yield deposits. Meanwhile, our competitors invest more heavily in frontier technologies and manage to scale faster. You can see this in the numbers. R&D intensity in the EU is around 2.2% of GDP, compared with roughly 3.4% in the United States. Venture capital investment is roughly 0.3% of GDP in Europe, compared with around 0.7% in the United States. And those are not really abstract statistics. They translate into whether companies can grow, they translate into whether ideas can scale, and whether Europe sets standards or adopts them. Are you a standard setter or a standard taker? The gap is not accidental, it's not coincidental, it reflects structural features of the financial system, a stronger reliance on bank-based intermediation, fragmented capital markets, and a risk culture that too often favors preservation over scale. So there's the core diagnosis, I would say. Europe does not lack ideas. It does not lack talent. It does not lack savings. What it lacks is the scale and the channels, the mechanisms, to turn savings into investments, into innovation. That is why the Savings and Investment Union matters so much. This is why we codified it as the core project that can be delivered in the coming years. It is the structural reform that Europe has postponed for too long. But it is also why we must now speak seriously about the next layer, modernizing the infrastructure through which capital moves, through which capital flows. This is where the EIB group is absolutely essential. The EIB and the EIF are not only lenders, they are builders of European capacity. They de-risk investment where markets hesitate. They bring projects to bankability. They create standards. They help Europe crowd in private capital. In other words, the EIB group is one of the few institutions with the mandate and the credibility to bridge Europe's savings with Europe's need for scale. If Europe wants to compete, and it does so, we need more projects that are investable, more markets that are investable, and more pathways for private capital to follow public de-risking. This is not a slogan, and it shouldn't be just a slogan. This is the practical mechanics of competitiveness. And it is why the theme of this forum, strengthening competitiveness and security, is not only timely. I would say that it is absolutely unavoidable. That brings me to the focus of my remarks, digital finance. Digital finance is not a marginal upgrade to our financial system. It is a structural transformation vis-à-vis how capital is raised, allocated, settled, and supervised. The transformation will happen, with us or without us. The real question is whether Europe shapes it or whether Europe adapts to it, to frameworks that are actually created elsewhere. If we get it right, digital finance can do something profoundly important for Europe. It can compress distance. It can compress the distance between savers and innovators. It can compress the distance between small firms and deep pools of capital. It can compress the distance between national markets and the genuinely European market. Distributed ledger technologies, DLTs, can reduce frictions in clearing and settlement, lower issuance and intermediation costs, accelerate cross-border payments, and expand access to investment. Tokenization can reduce issuance costs, particularly for SMEs, and connect companies to wider investor bases across Europe. The point, I would say, and also not only wearing my finance minister hat, but my previous digital transformation minister hat, is that technology is not about technology. You don't do technological change for its own sake. The point is how it can mobilize and solve societal needs. In the specific case, how it can lower structural cost of capital in Europe and whether we can allocate capital faster and more efficiently to productive investment. The rewards are real: greater innovation, greater inclusion, more competition, lower costs for innovators, deeper pools of finance for entrepreneurs, more transparency for investors. But this can happen only if we embed this within the broader European institutional framework. Digital finance cannot substitute for structural integration. It can only complement it. It must complement it. The Savings and Investment Union deepens and integrates capital markets across Europe. Digital finance modernizes the infrastructure that allows those markets to function efficiently and at scale. Integration without modern infrastructure will be slower, will be more expensive, will be less competitive. Modern infrastructure without integration will remain fragmented and small. So you need both. So I would say that those are actually not two parallel agendas. It is one broader strategic project. Integration and modernization advancing hand in hand, advancing together. This is how we mobilize Europe's savings more efficiently. This is how we fund innovation at scale, and this is how we build the European capacity that our competitiveness and security now largely depend upon. But where there is promise, there is always risk as well. And Europe has learned this lesson before. Financial innovation delivers efficiency, but also requires further coordinated supervision and robust governance if we want trust and stability to travel with it. So we must be clear about the risks we have to manage while we're also unleashing the innovation that is absolutely essential. First, the first risk is fragmentation. We cannot allow digital innovation to fracture our markets into national silos. We cannot allow platform ecosystems to grow into new forms of market separatism. Second, volatility and instability. Crypto assets and stable coins have shown how quickly innovation can outpace oversight. Cyber risk is not a side issue in this regard. I would say that this is absolutely systemic. The lesson, in my view, here is straightforward. Innovation without trust does not really scale. And trust is not created by optimism. It's created by rules, supervision, credible enforcement. Europe has already taken an important step with MiCA. It has demonstrated that smart regulation can build trust, and trust can then enable scale. At the same time, preserving trust and stability in an increasingly digital financial ecosystem remains essential. And in this context, the digital euro is a key strategic initiative. As President Lagarde has argued, it is about ensuring that central bank money remains available in the digital age, complementing cash, supporting innovation in payments, strengthening Europe's monetary sovereignty, and reinforcing the resilience and the autonomy of European payment systems. I would say that this is the core project with regards to capacity building, to further capacity building the international role of the euro. We're now moving beyond the preparation phase and into the next stage of technical work in this regard, and the time frame is already set for the adoption of the digital euro for the coming years. But in reality, if there's one key point to make here, is that Europe must not outsource the foundations of its payments architecture. It must actually create a very strong public infrastructure and then allow for private innovation to take place around this public infrastructure at the same time. There is also a geopolitical dimension here. In an era defined by technological rivalry and strategic competition, financial infrastructure is an instrument of sovereignty. The question is not whether digital finance will grow. The question is whether it strengthens Europe's autonomy and stability, or whether it creates new dependencies. And I think this is quite critical to understand, both vis-à-vis digital finance, but also with regards to any other digital innovation, be that the cloud infrastructure, telecom infrastructure. Do you capacity build, or do you create new dependencies? And to which regard you allow for A or B to manifest itself? I would say that in this regard, we must ensure that digital innovation fortifies rather than weakens the integrity and the resilience of our systems. This means strengthening, in this regard, in this specific project, monetary independence. It means ensuring secure rails for payments and settlement. It means rules that protect stability and consumers while enabling markets to scale. The choice here is not between innovation and stability, in reality. It's not a trade-off. The real question is whether we have the strategic clarity and the political confidence to go with it, to achieve both at the same time. Let me end with what, in my view, success would look like in this regard. Success is a Europe where savings does not sit idle while innovators search for capital. Success is a Europe where a company can scale across borders as easily as it scales within a single member state. Success is a Europe where technology lowers costs and expands opportunity without undermining stability. Success is a Europe where capital markets do what they're meant to do, allocate capital efficiently to productive growth. If we get it right, if we get this right, digital finance will be a catalyst. It will deepen capital markets, enable seamless cross-border investment, and further fund innovation at scale. And institutions like the EIB Group will remain central, will be absolutely essential in this equation, not only as financiers, but as builders of European capacity, accelerators of investment, and anchors of trust. Trust is the direction Europe must now choose, not simply to manage stability, but to build the foundations of the next wave of prosperity. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Now we're going to have a panel discussion on digital finance, cryptos, and the Savings and Investment Union. And to set the scene for this, first of all, please welcome to the stage Gelsomina Vigliotti, who's Vice President here at the EIB.
Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. Thank you very much, Minister Pierrakakis. It's a seminal speech, I would say. I just want to introduce this panel. I do not want to add more on what has been already eloquently said by others, by our president yesterday, by the minister now. Maybe I can go deeper on some of the initiatives that the EIB actually is implementing to support and to enhance our, the way for a deeper capital markets. We have accelerated our work there in order to reduce fragmentation, to attract investors and ensure predictability, including the 28th regime proposal by the Commission. We are working to build pan-European capital markets from the bottom up, which is an important complement to top-down reforms and the development of new digital solutions. We have put forward initiatives like the European Tech Champions Initiative and Tech EU to nurture and scale up Europe's venture capital ecosystem, acting as anchor investor. The results speak for themselves. The European Tech Champions Initiative has already financed 13 new EU mega funds and 11 unicorns so far. Our pioneering venture debt instrument makes up 30% of the EU market. EIB Group securitization increased by 40% last year to exceed 6 billion euro. On the development of digital capital markets also, we are playing our part. We have a long-standing collaboration with the European Central Bank on digital bonds and the digital euro. For example, as part of the ECB's Pontes working group on using distributed ledger technology to settle transactions in central bank money. Let me also mention our great work with the Luxembourg Stock Exchange in building up the green bond market and digital finance. In parallel, the EIB Group finances European startups and fintech companies developing cross-border digital payment solutions, especially those facilitating euro transactions. Europe's economic strength must be mirrored in its monetary and financial footprint. Therefore, we are working closely with the ECB and the Commission to reinforce the international role of the euro. So as you can see, this is an extremely relevant panel for us and for us as the AB Group and all the guests that we have here today. And we are extremely happy to welcome all of you here today, and I look forward actually to the discussion which will follow up. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gelsomina. And just to say, unfortunately, the moderator, Isabel Mateos Ilago, couldn't make it, apparently due to fog in London. So Deborah Revoltella, who has very kindly offered to step in her place, Chief Economist of the EIB. So Deborah, you are going to be leading this panel, and with you on the panel we have Piero Cipollone, member of the Executive Board, European Central Bank. We have Javier Perez Tasso, Chief Executive Officer at SWIFT, Pierre Gramegna, Managing Director of the European Stability Mechanism, Julie Becker, Chief Executive Officer of the Luxembourg Stock Exchange, and Ignacio Gutierrez Rantia, who is the Chief Executive Officer at Citibank Europe.
So it's a real pleasure to moderate this panel and stepping in, even if very last second. But I think it's a great opportunity to have a in-depth discussion on the link between Saving and Investment Union and digital finance innovation. We had a two great presentations actually of the topic. I was just thinking out really to link these two aspects. The challenge that we see in Europe of having abundant savings, we know it. The problem is how these savings can go really to finance innovation and finance the scale-up of companies, and do it in a pan-European level, also having maybe more active insurance and pension fund playing their role more. Gelsomina was also talking about what we are doing as an institution, as the European Investment Bank Group. And then the second part of the discussion is related to digital finance, digital innovation. And the point is really in a moment of disruption, as innovation always brings a disruption. Can this disruption really make a change and work in the direction of this integrated market and saving and investment union that we wanted to see at the European level? And I know that the discussion will go global. Innovation is global, it's not only European, but I think this element of looking at what does it mean for saving and investment union and for Europe is also important. I have a great panel. I don't reintroduce everybody, but I just wanted to make the link why you are so important in this discussion. I think Julie Becker, everybody knows her in Europe, but in Luxembourg particularly is the leading of the Luxembourg Stock Exchange, which is a very famous stock exchange on the innovation point of view. Piero Cipollone, who is, can I call you Mr. Digital Euro, or is it? But definitely the person that at the ECB level is really making a change on this digital innovation. Pierre Gramegna, that leads the Eurozone safety net, so quite important, quite European, and with a strong say on saving and investment union. And Ignacio Gutierrez Omancia from Citi, the largest correspondent bank in the world and one of the largest banks in the world, so quite important. And Javier Perez Tasso, Swiss, and the way in which I would describe it is the world's largest digital bridge, connecting everything in the financial sector. So with that starting, I think we have 1 hour and 10 minutes. And my main question to start with is actually from the innovation and the digital innovation side. And I was thinking, in Europe, and maybe Piero, with the Italian origin, I can say, in Europe, in Tuscany, actually, we used to say that finance didn't change at all, and banking didn't change at all since Renaissance time. And the question is this digitalization really making a change, or is it just optimizing? And I know in all your institutions, you are looking at digital initiative, you are implementing them, and the question is, what is really changing? Can you describe what you are doing and how this is really important for the Saving and Investment Union? And I would start from you, Piero.
Thank you, Deborah. Is it working? Is it working? Okay. Thank you, Deborah, for having me in this panel. It's a real pleasure. So after the introduction of Minister Pierrakakis, I don't think I have to think much on this issue. So on the digital euro, what we are doing actually at the ECB, let me just clarify a couple of issues. We call digital euro the retail solution, meaning that helping Europeans to solve the long-standing problem of a very fragmented retail payment market. But this is on a different level. What we are talking today is a different issue. Today, I understand when we talk about digital finance, I understand the following. I understand the fact that financial services are taking advantage of a very important innovation, which is tokenization and a new infrastructure that is called DLT. Tokenization is the real revolution. Tokenization means that an asset, whatever kind of asset, is transformed into a file, which condenses two things: the intrinsic value of the asset and the rules that govern this asset. And this file sits on a completely decentralized platform. And you can do many things with that. We can dig on that. But that's the revolution we are witnessing. This would allow market to transact 24/7, no intermediaries involved, full trust in the technology itself, no credit risk associated, and so forth. So from our point of view at the ECB, this is a really important innovation that we do want make come through. And how can we contribute to that? When we talk to market operators, they say, yes, this is an essential market. It's an essential innovation. But we need something to make it a scale. We need central bank money. Central bank money, for long stand, especially in the wholesale market, has been the safest asset you can imagine. No credit risk associated to that. Full elasticity, you can have as much liquidity as you want. So those kind of advantage, people would like to see translated into this world. And that's exactly what we are doing with these two projects that we call Pontes and Appia. We will allow people that wants to transact asset on DLT to pay and to settle those transactions in central bank money. So we are preserving the safety net and the security that is associated with the central bank money in traditional market into this new space. That's what we are doing. We will go live Q3 2026 with an initial project that will improve over time. This is the beginning of a long journey, and we will begin September 2026. Let me stop here.
Thank you very much. And Julie?
Thank you very much, Deborah. Good morning, all. Well, you mentioned the digital finance agenda we are pursuing, and at the Luxembourg Stock Exchange, it has been evolving around 4 axes. The first one was a DLT-based platform for fund distribution that we founded in 2016, before COVID, and went live during COVID, and now belongs to Deutsche Börse. The second one is something we are not yet speaking about. Maybe it's not the core topic of the panel today, but digital finance is also about digitalization of processes. And what we aimed at the time was really to be able to offer to the market participants a fully digital process of fixed income issuance. So really from term sheet generation to listing, with the objective for issuers to offer them the possibility to list in one click. And this happened in 2021. In 2022, we decided to advance what you just mentioned, tokenization and digital securities. And this has been done through the registration of the first native security tokens that were issued at the time by Société Générale. 3 of them were admitted to our official list. Then EIB was very innovative by issuing a first digital green bond through Luxembourg-based platform. And it was followed by other issuances from MDBs like the IDB and World Bank, with security tokens digitally native through a specific DFMI platform that allows not only for listing, but also for admission to trading on a regulated market, which is quite an innovation. And finally, the Luxembourg state very recently also issued a digital treasury certificate. What is very important, I think, to show is that a traditional exchange can integrate digital capabilities without creating any friction. But what is also a necessity for us is really to ensure the combination of both worlds, making it interoperable and making sure that we leave choice to investors and issuers to choose on what type of platform they want to make their own decision, and they can, connect one platform to another. The last element I wanted to mention, well, maybe just before the last, so mentioning that we are also actively contributing to the APIA project led by the ECB. And the last digital innovation I wanted to mention is linked to sustainable finance. We are known indeed for our green exchange, but sustainability ambitions are very high also in Europe, and we can combine sustainability and digital, especially with respect to sustainable finance data innovation. So we recently acquired Tetrao, which is a Luxembourg-based company, startups which allow AI-powered ESG data extractions at a very large scale for sustainability data to be made available for investors to make informed investment decisions and to help also create very innovative and efficient new investment products. So how does this meet SIU? Well, first, obviously, if we want to channel capital flows in the right direction, they also need to get information, trusted information, reliable information that help us to create low-cost investment product. And as it was mentioned in introduction, of course, it's the objective also is to unlock the potential of digital finance and tokenization to lower issuance costs, increase transparency, and of course make Europe more efficient, more connected, and more accessible, because the objective also is, of course, to broaden the investor base so they can access to that type of instrument.
Very good. And Ignazio, what's your view from the global and also European perspective?
Well, I think, look, I think it's a common denominator for all of us, and much has been said already, is that, I mean, we just focused on growth and competitiveness of Europe, no? And we're talking about digital finance, but the reality is that we keep talking about all these developments that are surrounding us, and probably this world is going to be very different in the 2, 3, 4 years. So I think it's not about digital finance. I mean, finance is digital, and that's the future. So I think there is no discussion on that. So talking about savings and investment union or anything on finance unrelated or decoupled from digital, I think it goes cheek to cheek. So I think the reality is that the whole debate, I'm stating the obvious, no? So that's the very first point, no, about the nature. And look, the reality is a pull and a push factor, no? This is not only about technological developments, it's about adoption, no? Customers are more and more using the products. Players are investing more and more on technology, and business models are changing extremely rapidly. So the reality is that is absolutely enrooted in the change as we look at the savings and investment union. No? I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about generative AI and DLT and data analytics, but that's going to be changing market structures. and market operations. But at the same time, look, I mean, it's going to be building capital markets that are going to be efficient, transparent, robust. And that will end up ultimately in a stronger and more competitive Europe. So we are working on blockchain. We're trying to respond to the needs of our clients, and it's ultimately having a business that is flexible, working 24/7. I think at the bottom of this is about making sure that financial services are working 24/7. It's efficient. You have collateral mobility, and in reality you have reduced cost and friction. So I think it's all well embedded. The diagnosis is clear. So it's more about, as we usually say these days, on many fronts, execution. No?
And Javier from.
Yeah, hello. Well, thank you again for putting this panel together and seeing some good old friends here and sharing the thoughts that are keeping us pretty busy at the moment in general as an industry. And maybe on your question on digital finance, maybe I'll pick up on what you both said, because you talk about finance today is digital already, and Pierre is talking obviously about the next generation of digital finance. Actually, that's kind of true in both accounts, because from our perspective, from SWIFT perspective, and our contribution obviously to the Savings and Investment Union, we see it from both of these lenses. On the one hand, existing digital finance can be taken to the next level. So there is when we talk about existing rails, when we talk about existing payments and securities infrastructures. Clearly, and I'll mention a couple of facts there, there's a tremendous amount of evolution happening at the moment, and that has happened over the past 3 to 5 years, and that are putting those existing rails to the next level in terms of supporting the Savings and Investment Union, or in general supporting digital finance. Then, of course, we have the next generation of innovations and the world of tokenization that clearly the ECB is a perfect example of what you've been up to with Pontes and Appia and many of the use cases, and you mentioned as well on tokenized bonds, for example, and other trials, live trials that has happened across the board. And then the third part would be, that there's going to be a period in time that may be pretty long where these two worlds will need to interoperate, will need to coexist with each other. So from SWIFT perspective, obviously I think everybody knows SWIFT is an industry-owned cooperative. It's not a commercial organization. It's owned by the banks and is there to make sure that we support global interconnectivity across 200 countries to support trade, cross-border payments, and capital markets. Actually, securities has become the largest volume generator in our network, so with post-trade security settlement. So in that regard, we've realized that we can take the existing rails that obviously the focus is to be highly secure, resilient, availability of services, the highest level of risk and control, and AML practices embedded into it, to the next level in terms of innovation. And I commend obviously the work that the G20 with the FSB have been doing in trying to improve the way not just speed, but also transparency is shared across the globe. And indeed, for example, areas of effort like the ECB has done on TIPS, who has an underlying payment infrastructure that integrated with our new scheme in terms of carrying transactions across borders, can make cross-border payments near instant across 200 countries, as long as the domestic payment rails are available in the domestic end. So that is on the first digital finance kind of part of it, which is what you were referring to, Ignacio. The second area, of course, is the fact that there are going to be more choices in the future, not fewer, and customers will demand more of these choices as well. And that is where we are also embedding ourselves, our own blockchain-based ledger into our SWIFT infrastructure to support all of these efforts of exchanging tokenized value, exchanging tokenized bonds across public and private blockchains, across different jurisdictions, but providing what SWIFT brings in terms of a single single point of trust, traceability, and tracking across all transactions, regardless of the way they settle and the networks they use and the forms they take. And that is fundamental, to the last point in terms of interoperating, which is probably something that we'll talk in this panel, because there's going to need to be a path towards coexisting both of these elements.
Yes.
Just a word, Deborah, to totally agree with you and underline maybe one very important point. We are speaking today about DLT and the link with SIU, not because it's new. That's very important to understand. It's not because it's new, it's because really it helps solve a number of barriers in Europe that hold Europe behind. That's the point we need to make very clear.
Yes. And Pierre, you wanted to add?
Well, thank you for having me. I've been coming many years to this forum of the IB, which is one of the greatest events being organized in Luxembourg, but I think also, intellectually speaking, a very high-level event at any standard, European or worldwide. I think that what I would like to say is a couple of things seen from the lender of last resort, the European Stability Mechanism, as we are present on the markets and issue 25 billion euro bonds every year. So we are an actor, a player of a special kind. And we sit around the Eurogroup, and so we have been following the discussion on the digital euro that Piero has very nicely explained since the beginning. Maybe one fact first. I think the Chinese were among the first ones to look into a digital currency. I remember when I was finance minister going to China in 2015, the Central Bank of China told me about that. I mean, at that time, we were not really thinking that much about it. The Indians have started also before us, and they actually have some digital rupees functioning and circulating. The European Central Bank started the discussion around 2020, 2021, when I was still around the Eurogroup in my former capacity of finance minister. And I think a lot has happened. And it is high time it happens, and this is not a criticism, because all this is maturing. One thing you have to maybe keep in mind is this is happening in front of our eyes. It's not to judge about if it's good or bad, if it's fruitful or not. It is happening. Now, why it is happening? Because it is fruitful, because it is efficient, cost efficient, fast, the young generation pays with it, and so on and so on. So first, accept the fact that it's there, and Europe will not stop it. Minister Pierre Kakis, the new president of the Eurogroup, insisted a lot on that, and rightly so. So it is happening, and we want to be part of it as Europe, shaping it. Not being on the menu, if you want, on the menu, as is often said, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. We want to be around the table and shape it ourselves. And we are doing that, so that's key. So it is not only, it's not a technical topic at all, it's crucial for our sovereignty and strategic autonomy. It is crucial for the functioning of our economies. It's not de l'art pour l'art. And basically, it will help us deliver on the SIU. Because the Savings and Investment Union is about tearing down the obstacles and having a less fragmented market. And by having digital currency building on tokenization, well, this will happen on its own, independently. We're going to speak more about SIU later, about what Europe should do and so on. But the fact that these two topics are together in the conference, I asked myself only yesterday when I reread all the things, I said, in the beginning I said, oh, they have put two topics together. The two topics are interlinked very heavily, much more than we're probably aware. So one way to get rid of obstacles is by having the digital currency. And then one thing that hasn't been mentioned, but I think it's extremely important to underline, yes, it had been underlined by you, Piero, but say that there's many ways to use digital ledger technologies and to do digital money or crypto money. One way is doing it privately, let's say Bitcoin. One way is doing it privately, stablecoin, which has the advantage compared to the cryptocurrencies that we know that it is stable. Please note that in the United States, it's been forbidden to the Fed, to the central bank of the United States, to issue stablecoins. So exactly the opposite of the strategy that Europe has taken, that we want to have a digital euro that is based on the trust that we have in the European Central Bank, and that's why we do a digital euro, which is a central bank digital currency. So this is a key difference. And this key difference is all the more important that, as you have said it, Piero, what you need behind this technology and behind this payment is full trust of the consumer and full trust of enterprises. I think this is the biggest advantage of doing it. And I will finish with the last thing, which is the question of speed. And I think this has been highlighted by Javier and others, and by usually, we have the existing system, SWIFT and lots of other things of settlement, and then we have tokenization and digitalization, to call it differently, that allows us to settle more efficiently, more quickly. So the fact that, because I hear that criticism often, we are slow, Europe is slow, everybody's slow on this. Because it is complex, we have to change the system completely. We need to have a transition period, and that's you explained very well. And we will have now the project Appia and Pontes already this year, and there's also some trials to do there. How to do that, how you manage the transition period to get to a final system that works. And when you really think of it, in the end, maybe in a couple of years, we will look at our banknotes as something extremely old-fashioned, like we look at cars of the 19th century, and wonder how was it possible that we did not function as we will then. Building on what? Building on digitalization, or as you nicely put it, packages of bits and pieces that represent the asset.
No, I think we had an excellent first round, and my second input for you for the discussion is to think at what are the most promising elements that you see and the biggest pitfall, and always thinking at what we ultimately want in Europe is fast adoption of the innovation, getting all the benefit out of it, and also looking at our sovereignty in the moment, in the geopolitical context in which we are living today. And I would go in order, maybe again, Piero, starting with you.
Yeah, yes, thanks. When I try to describe this, or we discuss internally at the ECB, what the real advantages of this tokenization and DLT, the example we make is the following. I hope it will help you to understand that, help me to understand. If you think to the normal life of an asset, right? You need to issue an asset, then you trade it, and when you trade it, you need to clear the transaction and settle the transaction, and then the CST, they have to perform what they are called corporate services, paying fees and so on. Now, the way we are organized today, all those functions rely on a different institution and possibly technology, different technology stack. And then when you move the asset from one of these layers to the another, you need to reconcile, and the market need to be open at the same time, and this piles up cost and time. The difference with DLT is that all these functions can be on the same platform instantaneously. So imagine that today we are struggling to move from T+2 to T+1 in settlement. On DLT, transaction, the settlement will be t plus 0, actually will be instantly. So all this function would stay on the same stack. And this would change dramatically in terms of cost, in terms of what you can do. Moreover, imagine all the manual reconciliation you have. All these functions are written in the file, and what the file I was referring at. So to me, this is the profound transformation you have. Everything moving from, scattered structure managed by different institutions into one single ledger. This is a complete revolution. Moreover, process completely automized, working 24/7. This is a revolution, I think. Point is, and I insist on that, we will never tap into the benefit of this revolution if we don't give the right liquidity to this market. And that's what we are doing again. I insist on that because this is really important. If I have one additional second. When we talk about assets, we don't mean just securities. If you think carefully, even stable coins is an asset that can be traded. So even to allow a stable coin to take some space in the market, you need a sort of secondary market for stable coins. Otherwise, how do you go from a stable coin to fiat currency? That's why having tokenized central bank into the system would also benefit stable coins and, even more important, tokenized deposit, which are the next thing we should be discussing, which could really make also a difference. So again, the fact that we put everything, all the function on the same stack that would work 24/7 with the highly automatized processes. Think also about when you try to put on this AI, you can start to imagine what the world will look like in the future. Point is, are we ready to exploit these benefits or not? I have some doubt if we don't do the right thing. This is the key question we should be addressing.
Javier, I saw you saying yes several times.
You wanted to go in order, but fine. Yes, I typically not when Piero speaks because we go very deep in these intellectual conversations. Listen, I'm obviously totally in agreement, and other potentials that have talked about, like leveraging AI with agentic commerce, and underlying support for machine-to-machine payments, 24/7 programmability of money, and so forth. So clearly, and the liquidity topic, of course. I mean, the untrapped liquidity that exists today in the system, the current model that Piero was describing. So in terms of benefits, there are a huge amount. Then, of course, I think it's an important discussion that you talked about central bank digital currencies or stable coins, and stable coins, which type of stable coins as well, knowing that today, to this date, most or the biggest market share of stable coins are US dollar-backed stable coins. So that's another element, particularly because it's not necessarily something that could scale because it has sovereignty issues in particular economies that are not ready necessarily to move to a particular currency-backed stablecoin. Therefore, in addition to painting that future, I think what keeps us, and the banks as well, really optimistic and excited about the future is that there is a genuine willingness now to improve, take the current rails to the next level. So we are now seeing that payments can happen in seconds across jurisdictions. The old stereotypes that payments through the banks and SWIFT could take days and cost, huge percentage of the value of the exchange, of the transaction. These are now being addressed because many reasons. I mean, the public sector push with the G20 agenda. Also, let's face it, the FOMO, the fear of missing out, and the alternatives that stablecoin providers could become, the new PayPals for the banks in the retail space. So, because of many of these reasons, now the banks are now willing and jumping into it and supporting that cross-border payments should be exposed to the end customer as we see them today in the back end, because we see it at SWIFT. 75% of the $25 trillion that we exchange on a daily basis reach beneficiary banks within an hour, many in seconds. So in practice, obviously, it's a bit more complicated than that, but for specific segments, you could expose that to the end customer and get to interconnection of payment systems like the ECB, for example, is driving. So that's kind of what is really positive about this new era of innovation in our industry, is that we have an end game that is really exciting in terms of transformative, to Piero's description, but at the same time, it is driving urgency to the existing rails to be changed, and that is what we're doing at SWIFT with the community here.
And Ignacio, do you also feel the urgency?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think as we're probably the largest network bank, no? And we basically pivoting towards trade and commerce, no? And I think we're constantly looking for solutions that are borderless, that are real-time, and that are always on. So the reality is when you have something that meets those characteristics, for us is the crucial point on a solution. We are strong believers of the tokenization, no? I think tokenization for us meets that real-time 24/7 payments, I think at minimal cost, minimal administrative friction, and also works very well across different assets classes and strategies, and it's probably more ubiquitous good than the coins, no? We're working through digital money, custody services, payments, collateral mobility. I think I'm glad to show that we opened the city token services for Europe, no? For Euro, no? I mean, we're doing digital payments and liquidity for our clients in Euro now. We opened that not long ago, a couple of months ago. So now we have it in dollars in the US, in the UK, in Hong Kong, Singapore, and now in Ireland through Euro. And that allows us, again, working on that 24/7 on payments and liquidities. And it's been a very important development, no? I think on digital Euro, we really welcome the project and the process. I think it's obviously it's great to be here with Mr. Cipollone here, and we really like to thank him and congratulate him for all these initiatives like Appia and Pontes, no? I think, we put together very recently a piece about the fragmentation of capital markets and cover the topic, and look, some areas for us to focus on is, it's been discussed, is the financial stability, more importantly when you think about deposits, no? And as a consequence, the creation of credit, no? The second one is what is the cost associated with the development and the deployment of that for security for payment providers, no? And thirdly, and it's more generically, is the impact on the overall payment ecosystem. But I mean, I think we're really adamant and supportive of the initiative, looking at especially the developments, no? On-chain money, we think is also quite important for the development of capital markets, and we would also like to see the development of that wholesale digital euro, no? Which is going to be crucial for digital market, for the capital markets. We think that that's going to be quite important as well. So that's also a couple of points that I just would like to highlight here. Thank you.
And Pierre? Yes?
Yeah, very shortly, in this ubiquitous optimism about digital currencies, about cryptocurrencies, and all these efficiency gains, and all this is perfectly fine. Europe has been the first place where we put in regulation with the MiCAR, which is a good regulation, but is already a little bit old because the developments are so fast. So that needs to be looked at. Point number 2 is you mentioned wholesale. When I talked about digital euro, I meant obviously not only retail, but also wholesale. In fact, the ESM has, since the beginning, supported the idea of a wholesale digital euro, which for when I said this is what's going to help reduce obstacles and create a more fluid capital markets, it's because of wholesale use of the digital euro. But my third point is there are inherent risks about the transmission of monetary policy. And as we have Piero here with us, I think this is something that cannot be overlooked. The risks of problems of transmission of monetary policies are obviously much smaller if your digital currency is issued by the central bank itself, who is in charge of the monetary transmission. But if the initiative comes from the private sector, even if they comply with the regulations, there might be gaps in that. I don't want to sound like the typical European who always sees problems, but this one is not the kind of technicality that we should forget. So let's maybe say it this way. We need to address that, I mean the central banks need to address that now in the back of their mind, and we need to make sure that our regulation takes care of the issues that this raises. So that for a bank this is not immediately on the radar, or for a stock exchange I understand, but for us as European stability mechanism, we are there to safeguard the euro area. And if this would trigger from wherever on the planet problems in terms of money supply, over money supply, which would trigger financial instability, that would be obviously very serious. So we have to preempt that from now and make sure that it doesn't happen. But you realize that we are only masters of our own European Union, or for the euro area. So a dialogue is also necessary with that, with other central banks. That's why it's important that it is the G20 topic, that it is looked at the planetary level. Let's not forget that in 2019, the Libra initiative, for those who remember, which was a private initiative to create a stablecoin, was pushed back by the G7. It was pushed back. So at the time, countries agreed that this should not happen. So there's been a spectacular reversal here. This is only 6-7 years ago. So let's keep that in the back of our minds, to not discourage all of us to embrace that technology, because we need to embrace technology. You cannot stop technology, but monetary policy is a topic of its own, that it's not the topic of today, but we need to have in mind.
Julie?
Yes. Well, I think a lot has been said. Just one additional element to what Pierre was mentioning. I think something we haven't discussed, even if it was maybe underlying, is the need also to preserve the strategic autonomy of Europe here, because of course we need a solution. Lots of DLT platforms exist and work well. The problem is a cash leg of the securities transaction, which still take place in T2, or which is handled separately by commercial banks. And so we need a CDBC. It's a real important building block for Europe to remain independent, because of course, especially retail investors, they could choose, of course, the US stablecoin if no alternative is proposed to them. And we have also to keep in mind that behind the euro stablecoin, we also have a stronger demand for European safe assets.
Yes. Do you want to react quickly?
No, maybe on this point. This is a very important point. So, if there is something true in what we have been saying, that really this, transformation, the new technology, DLT and tokenization will provide an opportunity for better financial services, Then the question is, who will be reaping this benefit? Who will be first? So far, until now, Europe was ahead of anybody else in issuing asset on DLT. Since last year, US are taking the lead. Now, US are still struggling on how to provide liquidity to this market. Their choice fundamentally has been, let the stable coins do. We think at the ECB, we think that there is an intrinsic, we would need another panel to discuss with that. There are good things that the stable coins can do, but probably on the wholesale market is not the best choice you can make. Because they are not elastic, because they, no matter what, can they peg, and this is a risk that we should not take. So we think that we really have an opportunity in Europe by reproducing on a DLT level the healthy equilibrium we have today between commercial bank money and central bank money. So, but we need to transit to that. So we are moving ahead. Probably the market should also move ahead in thinking about tokenized deposit, which would reproduce in the DLT space what we have today. Larger part of the transaction are done with commercial bank money. Do we have something analogous in the DLT space? Not yet. The closer we have are stable coins. But those are different animals, completely different animals. And we too need to reflect on that. But again, we need to make sure that this market develops in Europe, because if we don't, because there is an intrinsic value on these new technologies, we run the risk that all this innovation will be gathered in some other place. And we should avoid that, talking about strategic autonomy. We should avoid to reproduce today the dependency that we have in many, 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 many fields. Today, you know, the hype is on energy, but we can talk about retail payments, and then you know, we would go into the retail digital euro, but we can take another opportunity to do so. But that's very important, that we move in a coordinated way.
And I think you are making a very important point at the end, because what I hear from all of you is that actually this innovation is actually a very disruptive innovation for the finance that we know, and actually can bring a lot of benefits, but also challenge. But it's very disruptive for the market that we know. The link, I think I also took the one sentence from the president of the Eurogroup saying that for saving and investment union, a success is where saving do not stagnate but go to innovation and innovation finance. So I think it's really nice to have this link between the digital innovation disruption part, but always go back on what does this mean concretely for companies, innovative companies that needs to be financed. So we go in this direction now. We have a last round on the saving and investment union and the benefit. But before that, I would like to take a few minutes for questions. And I don't see anything in front of me because of the lights. And I have been told that also people with the microphone don't see their hands up. So you really have to stand if you want a microphone. OK, and I don't see you. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Andrej Kovařík. I'm a former member of European Parliament and currently member of a project team developing a market infrastructure for issuance of tokenized bonds for SMEs. I would like to follow up on the latest comments, and I fully share the analysis of Piero Cipollone on where we are currently now with the tokenized currencies. So basically, we have very large stablecoin markets in the US with no CBDC allowed. In Europe, we are very well advanced with the CBDC, but extremely low liquidity in the stablecoin market. You mentioned just a while ago that we should do whatever we can to make sure that there's more liquidity and there's a promotion of euro-denominated stablecoins. So I would like to ask you first, what concrete steps can we do to invite actors to actually engage in issuance of euro-denominated stablecoins first? And second, what can be done to integrate more DLT and faster DLT-based technologies into financial services markets? So not only the payment infrastructure, as has been mentioned, but also in securities, clearing, counterparty settlement, and all the transactions that would actually need to happen on financial services rails. Thank you.
Thank you. And we keep a couple of other questions. Please stand up if you want, because otherwise...
Hello. Yes. Here. Yes, good morning, everybody. My name is Davis. I'm the leader in charge of risk management and AI and data analytics in Forvis Mazar. And the topic is quite interesting, and I do have one specific question, and which is the continuity of what we discussed previously, is as of today, we know that digital finance and also fintech innovation inside the EU, and the EU often regulate very faster, if I can say like that, but how can we ensure that regulation can be a competitive advantage for the economy? Because we observe, as an example, currently in Luxembourg, more and more crypto, for example, crypto actors obtain license. And how can we be, with regulation, be more competitive and create a strong ecosystem, if I can say like that? Thank you.
Thank you. Another micro here. First row. Here in the...
Thank you. Yeah, hi. Hi, I'm Simina. I was a member of parliament in the budget committee in Romania, and I was challenged, to regulate crypto in 2021, so before the Ukrainian war. And it was very hard for me to regulate when the EU wasn't regulated. So I'm very grateful, for the MiCA regulation now. However, it doesn't state clearly the entire crypto market, and I feel like we're just regulating again but not innovating, and it will get worse, let's say, not just because of Trump in the US, but also because it goes ahead of us. It took us 15 years to regulate this in the EU. How can we make sure we can become a leader in crypto rather, than just regulating it? Now, I've heard your interventions, and I agree with what you said, but I think we have to move forward and be a bit more competitive. And also because crypto is moving around, and crypto has been fundraising for the war in Ukraine, but also has been giving money to Russians. So we need to make sure that when we regulate, we also become leaders in it, because otherwise, the US will come forward and will take our place. Thank you.
We have a last question here in the first row, then you pick the questions that you like, but please go also on the Saving and Investment Union part. But the last question.
Thank you. My name is Christoph Hock. I'm heading tokenization and digital assets at Union Investment. We are a Germany-based asset manager. And first I would like to take the opportunity to say a big thank you, Piero, to you and your ECB team, what you've achieved with wholesale CBDC, and in collaboration with the market and with the go live of Pontes and Appia in the coming month, because it's a key requirement. My question is to you and to Julie, what from your perspective is needed in the market to get into a scaling mode? So we've seen a number of use cases in the past where also we as Union Investment, in collaboration with EIB, participated on tokenized bonds. We are part of the contact groups of the ECB. But what from your perspective is required here in Europe to create a competitive Europe and to go into scaling mode based on DLT technology. Thank you.
So thank you. We have 15 minutes, so it's not little time still. So take the question that you want and also talk about what's the implication for saving an investment union. So Piero, we start with you.
Yeah, I can take the two questions about what we can do to make sure that we scale up on this market. First of all, on stable coins. I think the stable coins, the jury is still on for two reasons. If you look today at the use cases, it's true that there's been a big growth until October last year, but the use cases are still into the defined finance. There is very little in traditional market. There is something little take up into cross-border payments. So I'm not completely sure that there will be a large increase in the amount. In fact, since October last year, the market, more or less the outstanding amount has been around $300 billion. No more growth, so it's very stable. So maybe there will be some pickup, maybe not. And I think there might be a structural reason for that. We don't have the time to enter to that. I think that a more promising opportunity are tokenized deposit, because tokenized deposit leave the funds into the banking sector, and it's fully regulated. You don't need to put a new framework in terms of AML, combating the terrorism. So the framework is all there. It's just another way to mobilize private money. So I think there is more future on that. In any case, what can we do to scale it up? First, it's not just a matter of technology. If we replicate the fragmentation we have at the legislative level today into the new world, we would not have solved the problem. If we will have 27 regime that regulates the asset, you understand that despite the fact that these assets are on DLT, that would make a little bit easier to process all this complexity, still the complexity is there. So please, let's avoid to replicate on the new technology, the fragmentation that we have at the legislative level. This is my first call. The second call is, people tell me that in Europe we don't even have a unified concept of what a deposit is. What are the legal rights and obligations associated to that tokenized deposit? If we don't solve these fundamental issues, no one will venture into this at the scale that we need. So we will do our best to provide the liquidity, but someone was saying, you need people asking for these services in order to develop, but people will not ask if they are surrounded with all this uncertainty. And this speaks about, all the benefit. I mean, at the end of the day, infrastructure are a way to move, at the pipes. We can improve the pipes to make the saving investment union more efficient, but you need someone to provide the liquidity to put that in the right form. So if the liquidity coming from Luxembourg is different from the one coming from Germany, they will never mix. So let me stop here.
Julie?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on this that indeed, as it was said already, the central bank deposit digital currency is a really an enabler to scale up. We need this building block absolutely today to make sure that the market can scale. So cannot agree more, but time is really of essence in this dimension if we want to keep our strategic autonomy.
Javier?
Yeah, so I'd like to comment on the couple of questions on, like Pierre said, on stablecoin and the platform and the need. So yes, in terms of on the question about US dollar-backed stablecoin being prevalent at the moment, and there are a couple of initiatives, a consortium of banks as well launching euro-based stablecoins. But I think if your question was about scalability and getting the ball rolling and liquidity in the market, clearly, and that is, by the way, our belief as well, what Pierre is saying on tokenized deposits. When I mentioned earlier that we've launched, we've added a blockchain-based ledger into the SWIFT infrastructure. Essentially, it's not about, just to be clear, SWIFT issuing its own coin that will change the nature of the company. We are an infrastructure, so we limit ourselves to being the technology provider there. But we're leveraging who we are, which is a neutral global cooperative that has 11,000 endpoints, so we can leverage identity, the identity services that exist to get a blockchain-based ledger that scale immediately. And the use case that we've started, and we're focusing because we need to be laser focused on one use case to make it, at least to make momentum there, is tokenized deposits. And we're working with some 40-plus banks, including here, obviously, Citi, part of the group, to make tokenized deposits be an exchange with all the value that Piero was referring to, 24/7, programmability as well, but more importantly is with all the processes that exist today in terms of AML, compliance, risk controls, cyber fraud. And that is what I think, parting thought here, is that when we build this new infrastructure, technology is typically the easy piece, all that goes behind the scenes in terms of, as I mentioned, compliance, cyber, risk and control, governance of the infrastructure. That is why it is so crucial that we work on this together and on use cases that can be narrow enough to get traction.
Ignacio?
Yeah, look, I think we're 5 minutes from that. I just like to end up with at least our positive note. No, the reality is that we are a massive economic bloc with huge trading power, good values, and the reality is there is political willingness. No, and I think, but at the same time, clock is ticking, and 2026 is a crucial year. No, and it's good to hear President Costa saying that we will deliver this year. No, and I think that gives us some hope. We're monitoring very closely the group of the Minister of Finance of the E6. I think it's been said that there is no developments that are willing to move on their own, but it's also true that President Ursula von der Leyen said that if there is no progress, we're going to try to find I think she said, quote unquote, some enhanced cooperation. And I think may only just take 3 others to join these 6 to get this forward. So I just wanted to say that we are positive as well on the whole legislative process that is going on. It is true that the process does not only depend on the technological developments, it takes the regulatory and the legislation, but also, we think positive on the European Commission. But it takes time for parliaments to get there. So, it's not only about legislative changes, it's about being legitimate. And I think, when you see all that together converging, I think for us the most important thing is the urgent need to do it. We have massive themes on the table, savings on people's pockets, and we need to equitize trillions of dollars. So I think someone said, what does it take? I guess it takes generosity, elevation, anticipation, and a catalyst. And if we don't have catalyst already, what it's out there, I don't know when we're going to have a catalyst. So when we put all that together, that the bloc, the political willingness, the focus, the need, I think, we hope that we're able to overcome those regulatory hurdles that separate from, that functioning and that single and savings and investment union. No?
Pierre?
Yes, as time is running, I take the opportunity to jump on what Ignacio just said. we have now really discussed mostly digital, and it's perfectly fine. And we have, as we know, a package of legislation that the European Commission has proposed. I would like to congratulate the Commission because they have come up with proposals on securitization, on pension products, on having smart saving accounts in countries, and lately about integration of capital markets, which is a very ambitious proposal. And there, I think, on the basis of what we have all discussed and building on the disruption that digitalization brings about, creative disruption, I would dare say, we need to adjust to legislation. I think, Piero, you've used an excellent example when you mentioned that the regulation on deposits is different in 27 countries. Let's use the fact that we will have tokenized deposits, so digital deposits, to immediately say, let's do that European-wide. And I would take the example of the investment funds, where Europeans were able to agree, because they had a degree of integration that was much more than the rest of the world. We were able to agree on funds when nobody even knew what funds were. And so we were ahead. We could be ahead on tokenized items, on tokenized deposits. I really see there that we have lots of advantages. The fact that for us banks are more important than equity markets. One can regret that. In fact, we should have more equity, not less banks. But we have all these accumulated savings, these 40 trillion are sitting mostly in banks. So if we manage to have tokenized deposits in Europe and have a common regulation, I think this would boost growth. And let's face it, our growth has been shallow. We have grown twice as fast as the United States in the last 10 or 20 years. When you accumulate that, the gap that this creates, it's just enormous. But I am confident because we have two disruptions. We have the digital disruption and we have the geopolitical disruption. And I think both of them force us to act.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect conclusion. And I wanted to say exactly the same. It's in which disruptions that things change. And we have this massive disruption coming up, as you were just mentioning. We need to use them also in the European interest. And I think that it all gets back. Yesterday, we talked a lot about the European single market, European integration, etc. It all comes back to that. And I remain with, I repeat what the president of the Eurogroup was saying. Success at the end will be when dormant saving, I know that not everybody wants to say dormant, but let's say not so dynamic savings go cross-border and finance innovation. And that's exactly what Gelsomina was saying in terms of what we, from our side as the EIB investment group, we are really trying to support. And with that, I close the panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much for Deborah stepping in there really right at the last minute. Very, very kind. And now, before you leave, we have a wonderful conversation with Arthur Mensch coming up, Chief Executive Officer of Mistral AI. But obviously, we have to wait a moment because there's a very important photograph being taken right now. And for anybody who doesn't know, Arthur is one of the 3 co-founders of Mistral AI. And we're going to talk about experience on innovation and also the future of AI in Europe. So Arthur, please come to the stage. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. If I could ask you to leave. Thanks. So Arthur, you can sit next to me. Lovely to meet you. There we go. There's the microphone. Wonderful. So I get the chance to sit on a chair on the stage. How exciting for me. Arthur, now, I love the fact that when you go to visit my website on LinkedIn, it links to Mistral. Not everybody has that opportunity. Mistral AI, one of Europe's most exciting tech stories. You're being wheeled out to all of the big events. It must be quite hard to find the time to do the actual work. Welcome here. Welcome to the EIB Group Forum. It's wonderful to have you here. You founded Mistral in April 2023, so it's less than 3 years old. In that time, you have built a company with, I think, 800 employees now, about 800 employees. So in the time that some people might do a PhD, you founded Mistral with a workforce of currently 800 people. 3 co-founders. You yourself spent time with Google DeepMind in Paris. Guillaume Lample with Facebook, he did his PhD with Facebook, and Timothée Lecroix, also a PhD student with Facebook. So Google DeepMind, Facebook. What did you 3, as co-founders, bring from your experiences there to Mistral? What did you want to take from those companies, and what did you want to differentiate?
Well, so I mean, before I spent a little more than 2 years at Google. So before that, I was actually in the French academia, and so I would say most of the scientific things I learned were actually in the French academia. But what I learned at DeepMind and what Guillaume and Timothée were learning 1 kilometer away from that at the Meta office was really to train AI models at scale. AI is a capital-intensive R&D endeavor in that you need a lot of computation to actually train strong models and to train models that are big and running on a lot of GPUs at the same time to make them good. Well, you need to have access to the GPUs. And so it turns out that Google had a lot of cash to invest already at that time and was providing with enough infrastructure to do interesting research in that domain. And so that's what I learned, that's what Guillaume and Timothée learned as well. What we wanted to do in 2023 was to actually create a European champion on the domain of generative AI, because we saw the wave coming of disruptive technology that would become critical for digital sovereignty, that would be critical for business continuity, and that would create a lot of value. And the way we saw it from the inside was that there was no alternative at the time, and if we weren't to do anything to promote open source technology and to put Europe on the map, there wouldn't be any Europe on the map. So that's what got us started in 2023. And then we started as a research lab and then grew the company and grew the business.
Yeah, you've mentioned the word sovereignty there. It's very, very important, of course. And something that does differentiate you is your B2B model. And you did have a meeting this morning with Luc Frieden, Prime Minister of Luxembourg. Sovereignty, meetings with people like that. How did those conversations go?
Well, we don't really like to speak about sovereignty in that it's oftentimes a term to describe lower technology in Europe. But on the other hand, we speak about strategic autonomy. What we do, our technology is not differentiated because it's sovereign. It's differentiated because we engage deeply with enterprises, with states. We have state-of-the-art models on multiple domains, and our team is able to adapt them quickly and to create business applications on top. So that's the true differentiation, which is a global differentiation. And I think that's the first learning we had at Mistral, is that if you want to be a champion and relevant in the space, you need to be exporting technology. You can't focus on just building domestic technology for Europe. You need to be an exporter. So that's the first thing. Now, to your point on sovereignty as a political topic and a political term, artificial intelligence is important for sovereignty, I would say for 3 main reasons. The first one is economic sovereignty. A lot of the tasks that white collars are doing today are going to be more and more delegated to AI systems. And so inherently, this is creating a shift in where the economy, the value accrues across the industry and across the economy. And what that means, if Europe remain fully dependent on US providers to an 80% extent, which it is today, what that means that the economic balance is going to continue shifting in terms of digital services. What that means is that the value that we send to the US is going to be reinvested in R&D, and that's going to accrue the gap in between what they do, what we do. And so so that's a big problem, and that's eventually going to become a strategic problem because it creates dependency, because they have turn off and turn on button, etc. So there's a question of economic sovereignty. There's a question of business continuity. AI is about running processes, and it's going to run critical processes in our economy, whether with utility companies, industry companies, public services, defense systems. And if you can't afford the business continuity, well, you're going to depend on, basically you're becoming a client state to the one that is providing you with the technology. So that's something we need to avoid. And it applies specifically to defense systems. It applies to public sector, but also to defense systems. And then the third pillar, so economic sovereignty, strategic sovereignty, business continuity. Third pillar is a cultural one. These are the systems we're building are generating content. Those are interaction machines. They behave in a certain way. They have a certain cultural biases. If you have a centralized systems, then you're basically trusting the central provider with whatever ideas or opinions he wants to push. And we don't think that this is actually compatible with democracy. And so that's that aspect of customizing systems for every state, bringing languages to rare languages, European languages to our models specifically is super important. And I think it's going to play a critical role in the upcoming election. This technology will play a critical role in upcoming elections because it's a major source of influence. We're a B2B company, so we try and make sure that other companies can take our technology and serve end users, but we're quite afraid of the concentration of AI for consumers. And that's something we should really realize and consider as a risk.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to come back to languages. I'm very glad that you mentioned that because we're sitting here in Europe and I don't even know how many languages are in this room. Scaling up at the rate that you have and talent. So money investment, we've been speaking about that for the last day and a half, and finding the right talent at the right price. So firstly, you said that you learned everything you needed to learn at India. That's where you were studying in France for your PhD. Wonderful. We have brilliant researchers across Europe. Where are you finding your best talent?
We find them across Europe. Actually, we find them, historically our big headquarters is actually in Paris, which has great engineering schools, great PhD programs. But we also find them here in Luxembourg. We find them in Warsaw. We find them in Germany, in Greece. It's no longer part of the European Union, but we have a fairly big team in the UK as well.
Your second biggest office is in London.
It's our second biggest office, yes. But overall, our strategy has been to open local offices and go for regional talent pools in Europe. And Europe has a lot of regional talent pools. And if you give a researcher or an engineer the opportunities to stay in his hometown with the right compensation, of course, but also the right project, they would rather do that than fly to the US. So our strategy has been really to have these local offices and hire junior people, because Europe is great at producing junior people, and then sometimes relocate some of our fellow European citizens from the US to Europe, and they bring a certain seniority.
Well, that's an interesting point, that you're hiring junior people in Europe, and I'm going to lean on that slightly because the salary tag, and I know this because I've got friends at Google DeepMind in London, they can get 7 figures for the work they do. So why would somebody choose to work with Mistral as opposed to getting those 7 figures in the US?
Well, first of all, they get similar salaries with us, and especially what they see in coming with us, that we heavily incentivize them with options and shares. And so the equity trajectory we've had means that from a pure economic perspective, joining Mistral has been actually more interesting than joining Google. So that's how we work. It's actually something. The stock option regimes is a bit of a nightmare, honestly, in Europe, because you have 27 of them. And so unification of that would be great, although it's very hard because it's basically fiscally.
You've touched on a topic of the day. Yes, so, well, that wasn't the first time something like that was brought to our attention. Yesterday with Hélène von Roeder, CFO of Merck Group. And she was saying that, well, in a different way, but similar, with some of the EU legislation, country to country, there are other tweaks put on top. So you've talked about shares, but I imagine it might be the same with the hiring, the HR process. So if you could put out a few recommendations for a company that's growing at the rate you're growing, what would make your life simpler and more efficient for companies to grow at the rate you are growing?
Well, I think the biggest problem in Europe are the notice periods. The fact that you can't just get some people from companies because they will need to stay there for 3 months. So the viscosity of hiring is much, much higher than in the US. So the biggest problem, and it applies to every country in different ways, some are worse than others, is the fact that an employee who wants to leave his company has to give a 3 months notice period. And that's a full catastrophe. We should give more rights to employees, make sure that if they want to leave their company, they can leave their company in like a week. And that's the biggest source of, there are many things that are harder to build here in Europe than in the US, but the viscosity of hiring is one of them. There are other things, but I would say if there was one thing to improve, it's really this.
What would the second thing be?
Well, I think there are things that inherently Europe cannot do much about because it's about time and depth of the ecosystem and accumulation of different companies that have already scaled. But the biggest hurdle we find ourselves in is to hire senior people, executives, people that have scaled go-to-market teams, people that have scaled marketing teams. So the talent shortage is not where you would expect it. So of course, Europe is great at training engineers. And we have, I think, figured out how to retain those engineers and make sure they're not flying away to the US. But because the ecosystem is young, because there isn't that many companies that have already done the scaling journey all the way to IPO, etc., you can't find, if I'm looking for a CMO, if I was in the Silicon Valley looking for a CMO, I could just, like in a week, I would interview 10 of them, and the week after I would hire a CMO. Here, there's basically 0 CMO that actually can do what we need to do in Europe. And so there is a strong shortage there and nothing we can do about it because it's all about experience. It's all about having already the companies that have trained those people, those executives that will join younger companies.
You mentioned engineers. I know that you need engineers, of course. We all know that in the room. Daniela Amodi, co-founder and president of Anthropic, very recently is famed in the media for saying humanities subjects are becoming more important than ever. What do you think about that? How many humanities degrees are you hiring?
No, we hire a lot of, we have a bias toward engineers, including in sales team, but when, like our research team is actually a team of PhDs, and some of them are actually humanity trained. So we have journalists that are tweaking the models and making sure that they behave in a certain ways, making sure that they are unbiased. And so inherently we do content generation, and content generation is a media. So you need to have people that know how media is done, how writing is done. Our models are actually great at creative writing, and they get picked up for that. So we get creative people that use our models to do that. I'm working with a non-profit organization that are creating a new play of Molière. So it's a full humanity department, specialist of Molière, and they used our models to generate a novel Molière play, really in the style of Molière, but using artificial intelligence. And so there are many creative things to do. There's also a lot of topics around how do you treat history topics, etc. And so we have a full team called Model Behavior in the company, and those are mostly humanity trained.
I just want to point out that not all journalists have humanities degrees. I also want to point out that Daniela's brother, Dario, studied physics and biophysics. So I think they have a brilliant balance there between the two of them. I don't have much time, sadly, with you. So I'm going to just jump on a bit very briefly on languages in Europe, large language models. How are you approaching that? Because it's a tough question.
Well, it's at the end, what matters if you want to make models strong in a certain language is that you need to have access to content in this language. And then you need to pick, at the time of training, you choose whether you're going to make the model slightly worse in English, but slightly better in German or in French. And so we make choices that are actually much more even across the languages because inherently our market is 60% in Europe. So we serve those. It matters for text, it matters for audio as well. We have released audio transcription machines that are great at dealing with all the European languages. The way we do it is really to deliberately choose to make our models slightly worse in English, but slightly better in other languages. And the way we can make it better is actually...
Did you say slightly worse in English?
So you make them slightly worse in English, but you make them slightly better in French and German. It's all... At the end, you're compressing knowledge, right? So you need to choose the mix of languages that you put into the model. And if you put like a little more percentage of French, then the model is going to be much better at French. But then what that means is that you need to put a little less percentage of English. So at the end, the diversity...
Not worse than, just smaller amounts.
Yeah, you put a little smaller amount, but this is a trade-off, right? You have a limited capacity, so if you want to make the model multicultural, then it's going to be slightly less proficient at speaking about language, about US cultural topics and these kind of things. And it's actually a good thing, because the problem is with models from the US is that they're very US-centered. So we work heavily on that. And the way the public sector can help is really by providing that content and by creating catalogs of free of right content that we can train on. And that's what we do with multiple states. That's what we do with Greece. That's what we do with Morocco. That's what we should do with every state in Europe.
And you're open source as well, which is a great thing. I have almost no time left, and we have Christel in front of us. In 30 seconds, what's the future of AI in Europe?
Well, I think the artificial intelligence is such an inflection point in technologies that the opportunity we have is to create large-scale AI cloud service providers and reduce the dependency to digital services that we have accepted, that we should never have accepted. But the previous dependency was about data storage. It was mostly about privacy. The new dependency that we may create if such champions do not appear is a process dependency and a business continuity risk. So we need such actors to emerge. We are proposing a vertically integrated AI cloud, and we will continue to scale. And the only way we can do it is through European solidarity, through demand, through working with European champions. And we see that this is what we are actually able to achieve today.
Arthur, thank you so much for coming here to the EIB Global Forum. We're very, very happy to have you, and good luck with everything that you and your co-founders are doing for Europe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, everybody, we have, since it is our wonderful Julie Becker from the Luxembourg Stock Exchange, we have one comment or question. So please remain.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I have a burning question. You all know that next week we'll celebrate the International Women's Day. So I dare asking you how many women you have in your teams, and how do you prevent gender biases in your models?
Oh, well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Julie, I'm only allowed to have your question because you are Julie Becker.
That's a good question. Let me get my number right. I think we have around a third of our research team are women. More than half of my leadership team are women. And 25% of our engineers are women. So it's not 50%, but if you look at the training we do in Europe, we have a tendency to actually exit the women very early when it comes to working on research. To working on scientific topic, which I think is a disaster. So we try our best to actually redress that a little bit we hire, we look, we make sure that we do more outbound for female, for instance, for women, because oftentimes they would not apply, and we're able to do that with like full equity at the hiring process level. But if you look at there is some biases that exist even at the exit of universities. Women would apply less to high-tech companies than men.
I think you're talking about bias in the application system. I think she also meant bias within AI in general.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have evaluations for that. It's a hard topic, managing biases, because models can generate many things, and it's kind of a fractal frontier of where the biases should be. But we work heavily on having the right evaluations so that when we produce the models, they are doing what we ask them to do.
Thank you for a wonderful question. Thank you, Arthur, for answering the question. Thank you. And now it's time for lunch, and we'll start at 2:15 exactly. Thank you.